Chapter 776. Xian Yuanpa and his group arrive. The sarcastic Xian Yuanpa. However, since the formation is almost complete, they will not make a move at this time. More importantly, they are still waiting for the arrival of His Highness Wu Shuang of the Great Xia Empire. While both sides were waiting, suddenly, a terrifying aura emanated from the horizon. Then, the sound of iron cavalry cutting through the sky echoed from space. The next second, a fiery red iron cavalry appeared leisurely from afar. Then, the young Marshal Xian Yuanpa of the Blazing Fire Army slowly appeared before everyone. Standing beside the fiery young Marshal Xian Yuanpa was a young man with a somewhat cold and aloof appearance. This young man is the incarnation of Xuanwu. At this point, he also planned to follow Xian Yuanpa. Of course, he also wanted to see just how powerful this peerless prince really was and whether he was worth following. At the very center of their army stood a woman whose appearance was like that of a fairy descended from heaven. The woman was wearing a luxurious robe. He gazed into the distance with a hint of indifference in his eyes. This person is none other than Princess Yenran of the Great Xia Empire. At this moment, she was also looking around her surroundings with some curiosity. After all, she had received a message from Chu Wuang before heading to the Emperor's tomb. Therefore, Chu Yenran naturally knew that the real secret realm this time was the Emperor's tomb in front of her. Moreover, she now possesses the Xuanwu Jade Pendant. Standing beside Xian Yuanpa and the others were two top-tier experts. The aura emanating from both of them had reached the quasi-emperor realm. Clearly, they were quasi-emperors from the Xianyuan family. With the arrival of Xian Yuanpa and his group, everyone present turned their attention to them. After all, Xian Yuanpa was originally known as the young Marshal Xianyuan, and also the legendary young Marshal of Blazing Fire. Therefore, his arrival has naturally attracted the attention of others. Moreover, among their group was Chu Yenran from the Great Xia Empire. This was none other than a princess of the Great Xia Empire, so her arrival naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. I didn't expect to see the dogs of the Heavenly God Academy so soon after I arrived. Is the Heavenly God Academy planning to gather together and go to their deaths? Upon arriving, Xian Yuanpa immediately turned his gaze to the group from the Heavenly God Academy. Without hesitation, he launched into a mocking remark directed at them. Of course, among everyone present, only the Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire dared to mock the Heavenly God Academy in this way. Even the experts of the Heaven-Mending Pavilion wouldn't dare to mock the Heavenly God Academy like that. After his taunts, Xian Yuanpa led his fiery legion slowly forward. Clearly, they didn't intend to take these top experts from the Heavenly God Academy seriously. However, just as Xian Yuanpa was about to step into the formation in front of him, the two quasi-emperor level experts from the Xianyuan family who were in front of him also quickly came to his side and blocked his way. There's a formation ahead. Young Marshal, please stop. One of the quasi-emperors looked at the formation in front of him with a solemn expression, because he could sense that there was an array in front of him that was different from the space they were in. Moreover, he is currently unable to break this formation. That's why he had a solemn expression on his face. Upon hearing the words of this quasi-emperor from the Xianyuan family, Xian Yuanpa immediately stopped in his tracks. Then, with a hint of surprise in his eyes, he looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Did you think you were going to die, so you set up an array to trap yourselves? It's a classic case of trapping the dog inside the door. But it seems like your Heavenly God Academy doesn't have enough dogs. Then he mocked the people from the Heavenly God Academy again. At the same time, there was a playful smile in his eyes. Upon hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, the students of the Heavenly God Academy instantly showed anger on their faces. Especially the three top geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. They never expected that Xian Yuanpa, the young Marshal of the Fiery Blaze, would dare to insult them like this. Of course, as the young Marshal of the Blazing Fire Army, Xian Yuanpa is also very quick-witted. Therefore, it was not surprising at all that the people mocking the Heavenly God Academy were doing so. Xian Yuanpa, today this is your burial ground. Not only your burial ground, but also the burial ground of everyone in the entire Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire who entered the secret realm. Then, the genius from the Heavenly God Academy, who was at the Great Sage level, stepped forward and looked at Xian Yuanpa, speaking as he unleashed a very powerful aura. At the same time, his eyes were filled with madness. You think you can kill someone from my Xianyuan family? You're dreaming. Don't die without knowing who killed you. Remember, the one who killed you was your grandfather, Xian Yuanpa. After hearing the words of the Great Sage from the Heavenly God Academy, Xian Yuanpa picked at his ear, then slowly walked over to a soldier from the Blazing Fire Legion beside him. Without the slightest hesitation, he took the bow and arrow from the soldier of the Fiery Legion. The drawing of the bow and the shooting of the arrow were done in one smooth motion. The fiery red arrow transformed into a flame and hurtled towards the Great Sage of the Heavenly God Academy. The great sage from the Heavenly God Academy merely unleashed a terrifying pressure, completely obliterating the arrow. However, Xian Yuanpa's actions were tantamount to insulting him. Therefore, we can see that the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy has a look of anger on his face. Xian Yuanpa, if you have the guts, then enter the formation. Then, his furious voice resounded throughout the entire sky. After speaking, he looked at the formation in front of him. If you call me Grandpa, then I will enter the formation. How about that? Otherwise, what if your Grandpa Xian Yuanpa doesn't enter the formation? In terms of verbal sparring, Xian Yuanpa was already among the best. So how could the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy possibly out-argue him? He looked at the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy with a playful expression and said, after all, he could have avoided entering this formation in the first place. So now he naturally has a playful smile on his face. Upon hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy was so angry that he was speechless. After all, there's nothing he can do if Xian Yuanpa can't enter the formation now. However, he quickly regained his composure. After all, Xian Yuanpa had to enter the battle regardless, because this represented not only a great war between the Xian Yuan family's Great Xia Empire and their Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, because they set up the formation here, if the Xian Yuan family and the Great Xia Empire do not come in, then they will naturally not be able to obtain the final inheritance. Therefore, it can be said that the Xian Yuan family and the Great Xia Empire must now enter the fray. Chapter 777 Yang Qilong's Method to Break the Formation. Great saints and quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy arrive one after another. However, what the people from the Heavenly God Academy did not expect was that if the people from the Great Xia Empire and the Xian Yuan family did not enter the formation, even if they obtained the jade pendant belonging to the Azure Dragon, it would be impossible for them to enter the Great Emperor's secret realm, because the Great Xia Empire controls the Xuanwu Jade Pendant, the Baihu Jade Pendant, and the Phoenix Jade Pendant. They cannot open the Emperor's tomb in front of them unless they enter it. At the same time, Chu Yenran slowly descended from the sky, and then looked at the formation in front of her with a look of doubt in her eyes. It is well known that Zhuge Liang of the Great Xia Empire was a master of formations, and Chu Yenran naturally learned a little from him. However, looking at the formation in front of her, Chu Yenran frowned. Chu Yenran realized that she couldn't break the formation in front of her. This moment made Chu Yenran feel somewhat confused and surprised. Your Highness, this formation contains the attack of a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm, so breaking this formation will require at least a quasi-emperor level formation master. Just as Chu Yenran's eyes were still filled with doubt, a young man holding a silver spear slowly appeared beside her. The young man looked at the array in front of him with a hint of doubt in his eyes and said, this young man was none other than Yang Qilong, one of the 7 generals of the Yang family. He had not expected that the Heavenly God Academy present would be able to set up such a formation. 7th General, I wonder how we can break this formation? Xian Yuanpa was somewhat surprised after hearing Yang Qilong's words, because there really wasn't a quasi-emperor level formation master among them. So he slowly walked to Yang Qilong's side and spoke to him. Because Yang Qilong was the 7th of the 7 generals of the Yang family, he called Yang Qilong the 7th general. To break such a formation, at least 10 top-tier quasi-emperor level experts would be needed. After sensing the formation in front of him, Yang Qilong spoke directly to Xian Yuanpa and Chu Yenran beside him, but after speaking, he added one more sentence. If it were a powerhouse at the Great Emperor level, only one person would be needed to break it, because it would be very easy for a powerhouse at the Great Emperor level to break such a formation. After finishing, he leisurely turned his gaze towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Although the formation in front of them was extremely difficult to break, the number of quasi-emperor level experts who had entered from the Great Xia Empire this time was quite large. If that's really the case, then it might be difficult to break through the formation in front of us this time. 7th General, among the 7 generals of your Yang family, there should only be 3 who have broken through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm, right? Xian Yuanpa spoke again at this moment, his eyes filled with a hint of helplessness, because he knew that the strongest quasi-emperor level expert in their Xian Yuan family was only a mid-quasi-emperor. Therefore, breaking such a formation is naturally not so easy. Of the 7 generals of the Yang family, only 3 have broken through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm, so there are still 7 quasi-emperor perfection realm beings missing. This shows how difficult it is to break this formation. General Yang, I wonder if those at other quasi-emperor levels can replace the original quasi-emperor level experts to break the formation? The quasi-emperor of the Xian Yuan family slowly stepped forward and asked. After all, their purpose in coming here was to obtain the great emperor's inheritance. And of course, the most important thing was to deal with the people from the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, they naturally hoped to kill everyone in the Heavenly God Academy as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, They're now facing a formation that is blocking their way. Leave the task of breaking the formation to our great Xia Empire. All you need to do later is kill these so-called experts from Tianshui Academy. After hearing what the Quasi-Emperor from the Xianyuan family said, Yang Qilong waved his hand and said, "Others may not know how many Quasi-Emperor level experts from our great Xia Empire have entered this world. However, as Yang Qilong, one of the Yang family generals of the great Xia Empire, he naturally knew that there were quite a few powerful individuals in their great Xia Empire who had entered the great Emperor's secret realm and reached the Quasi-Emperor perfection stage. Therefore, he naturally has such confidence. Upon hearing his words, Xian Yuanpa and the Quasi-Emperors of the Xianyuan family instantly showed expressions of excitement. If this is true, it means that the Great Xia Empire has as many as 10 Quasi-Emperor level experts who have entered the Great Emperor's secret realm, while the Heavenly God Academy has less than 20 Quasi-Emperor level experts, not to mention the Quasi-Emperor level experts of their Xianyuan family. It is still possible to completely kill the Quasi-Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. However, just as Yang Qilong and his companions learned how to break the formation in front of them, for terrifying auras appeared in the sky, emanating from them at the Quasi-Emperor level. The next second, these figures entered the formation without any hesitation. The formation had no effect on them. Clearly, they were Quasi-Emperors from the Heavenly God Academy. As these Quasi-Emperor level powerhouses from the Heavenly God Academy began to arrive slowly, other prodigies naturally came here as well. However, at this point, they naturally stopped behind Chu Yenran and the others. At the same time, many prodigies could see that the Xianyuan family of the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy had become adversaries, which meant that this great battle would probably take place here. Therefore, many talented individuals kept their distance after witnessing this scene. After all, they wouldn't dare participate in such a major battle. As time passed, the number of great sages and quasi-emperors in the Heavenly God Academy gradually increased. The number of quasi-emperors has grown from a dozen or so to over 30, while the number of great saint-level powerhouses has reached over 100. This made the expressions on the faces of the two quasi-emperors of the Xianyuan family grow increasingly solemn. Clearly, they hadn't expected the number of quasi-emperors at the Heavenly God Academy to be so high. When the great sage from the Heavenly God Academy saw that the number of quasi-emperors in their academy far exceeded that of the great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, an excited expression appeared on his face. Then one of the great sages looked in Xianyuan Po's direction and mocked him. "I didn't expect that there are only a few quasi-emperors who are considered one of the two top powers on the continent. They're not even enough for my Heavenly God Academy to fill a gap in its teeth." After all, Xianyuan Po the Xianyuan family had just mocked him, so naturally he wanted to retaliate. After he finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to Xian Yuanpa, because they also wanted to see how Xian Yuanpa would respond to the words of this great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 778 Tensions Rise. Murong Zhantian, one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, makes his choice. Of course, Xian Yuanpa was never a kind person to begin with. So when he heard the provocation from the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, he slowly stepped forward, looking at the great sage and quasi-emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of mockery in his eyes. "You're just a bunch of cowards who only dare to hide in your turtle shells. You little turtles dare to fight us? If you got the guts, come out and fight us. If you're not, keep hiding in your turtle shells." After Xian Yuanpa finished speaking, he gave the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy a provocative look, then turned around with a very dashing air and struck a pose of unparalleled skill. The great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, who had been wearing a smile, instantly turned gloomy after hearing Xian Yuanpa's words. He had thought he could mock Xian Yuanpa, but he never expected to be mocked by Xian Yuanpa instead. Anger instantly appeared on his face. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he looked directly in Xian Yuanpa's direction and spoke. "If the great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family have the guts, then come in and break the formation." After he finished speaking, he stepped back. He knew he couldn't possibly win an argument with Xian Yuanpa, so he felt somewhat helpless. After hearing the words of the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, Xian Yuanpa was somewhat helpless, but he still stepped forward with an unyielding look. "We can certainly break this little turtle shell, but Xian Yuanpa, have a bad habit when catching turtles. I like to pack up all the turtles and take them away. So now, I am naturally waiting for the other turtles from your Heavenly God Academy to arrive." After Xian Yuanpa finished speaking, there was still a hint of mockery in his eyes. He never lost when it came to verbal sparring. So he looked at the direction of the Heavenly God Academy in front of him without any attempt to hide his playful expression. Upon hearing Xian Yuanpa's words, the students from the Heavenly God Academy were completely taken aback. They hadn't expected Xian Yuanpa to be so eloquent. Xian Yuanpa, on the other hand, calmly gazed at the great saints and quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy before him. You're asking for death, kid. At the same time, a quasi-emperor level expert from the Heavenly God Academy decided to give in and stepped out of the formation, looking at Xian Yuanpa with a hint of anger in his eyes. After all, there are only a few quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, so what is there for him to fear? The other quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy also chose not to hold back and followed the quasi-emperor from the Angel Academy to the outside of the formation. They also exuded a terrifying aura, and a terrifying pressure instantly descended from the sky. Upon seeing this, the two quasi-emperors from the Xianyuan family in front of Xianyuan but quickly stepped forward, unleashing their quasi-emperor auras to protect Xianyuan behind them. However, although their auras had also reached the quasi-emperor level, there were only 2 of them at the moment, while the Heavenly God Academy had 5 quasi-emperor level experts, 2 of whom had even reached the mid-quasi-emperor stage in front of Xian Yuanpa. How dare you? You think you can be so presumptuous in front of me, just because you have 5 quasi-emperors? At this moment, Yang Qilong also stepped out, his aura of a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm erupting forth, his eyes filled with killing intent as he looked at the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. The aura emanating from him, belonging to the quasi-emperor perfection realm, instantly shocked everyone present, even though they had already guessed that Yang Qilong, one of the Yang family generals, had broken through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm. But they were even more shocked now. Upon sensing the aura belonging to the perfected quasi-emperor realm, the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy all wore solemn expressions. After all, there is still a certain distance between them and the quasi-emperor perfection realm. However, just as the faces of the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy were solemn, the quasi-emperor level experts behind the Heavenly God Academy also slowly walked out, their eyes filled with killing intent as they stared at Yang Qilong in front of them. After all, they have so many quasi-emperor level experts on their side now, and they naturally can't let Yang Qilong and the others go since they have the advantage. Then, a terrifying aura of a quasi-emperor level began to erupt. The surrounding prodigies also retreated upon seeing this scene, because they knew that if these 2 top forces were to engage in a major battle, they would become innocent, ordinary people. The war god temples wore venerable wore a solemn expression, and his face showed not only solemnity, but also struggle. He is currently considering whether or not to help the Great Xia Empire. He had already chosen to help the Great Xia Empire at the beginning, so now he only has 2 choices: help the Great Xia Empire or remain neutral. Otherwise, their war god temple would offend both the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. While Zhan Zun was considering whether to help the Great Xia Empire or not, Murong Zhantian did not hesitate at all and directly led out with the 2 great saint-level experts beside him. Although he is one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect, he only has 2 great sage-level beings by his side. As he slowly walked out, he went directly to Xian Yuanpa and the others, and then immediately looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Is the Heavenly God Academy planning to kill us all here? At the same time, Murong Zhantian's voice slowly came out, and as his voice came out, everyone present finally noticed Murong Zhantian. After hearing Murong Zhantian's words, the other great saint-level experts of the demonic sect understood his choice. So, those great saint-level experts who were still hesitating came to Murong Zhantian's back without hesitation. Since the 4 young masters of their demonic sect have chosen to help the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, then these great saint-level powerhouses of the demonic sect naturally have no other choice. Otherwise, once the Heavenly God Academy has dealt with the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family, it will be the demonic sect that will be dealt with next. The Heavenly God Academy was also somewhat surprised to see this scene. They did not expect that one of the 4 young masters of the demonic sect and these great saints of the demonic sect would choose to help the Great Xia Empire. Then, a great sage from the Heavenly God Academy slowly stepped forward and looked at Murong Zhantian with intense killing intent in his eyes. He had not expected that Murong Zhantian would help the Great Xia Empire. Are you provoking my Heavenly God Academy? At the same time, his voice rang out leisurely. Chapter 779, The Holy Lands Take Sides, and young Iron Hammer, General Yu Yun arrives. Upon hearing the words of this great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, the other members of the Heavenly God Academy also turned their gazes toward Murong Zhantian. They also wanted to see how Murong Zhantian would answer. If Murong Zhantian answered that he would fight against their Heavenly God Academy, then they would definitely kill Murong Zhantian completely. Our demonic sect has no intention of being enemies with the Heavenly God Academy, but it seems that the Heavenly God Academy is now hostile to all of us, so our demonic sect has no choice but to step forward. I wonder if this answer satisfies you. Murong Zhantian had already thought about how to reply to the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. He looked at the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy calmly and spoke. After he finished speaking, he stood calmly behind Xian Yuanpa. Upon seeing this, Xian Yuanpa couldn't help but give Murong Zhantian a thumbs up. Then he slowly turned his gaze to the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy, his eyes filled with a hint of mockery. Add me to the Temple of War. After Murong Zhantian stepped forward, Zhan Zun did not hesitate at all. He stepped forward with two great saint-level experts from the War God Temple beside him. He looked at the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy with a solemn expression. After all, the number of Quasi-Emperor level experts on the Heavenly God Academy's side far exceeded that on their side. However, he believed that the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family would not be unprepared. After all, the princess of the Great Xia Empire was here, and the young marshal of the Xianyuan family was also here, so he naturally did not have much worry on his face. At the same time, he also wanted to see the trump cards of the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family. This time, the number of god-level beings from the War God Temple who entered the Great Emperor's secret realm was not small. After their young temple master stepped forward, 7 or 8 great saints from the War God Temple stepped forward. They stood on the side of the Great Xia Empire without any hesitation. Plus my War God Palace. Upon hearing Zhan Zun's words, Long Zhantian did not hesitate at all. Since they were originally subordinate to the War God Palace, he naturally led the people of the War God Palace to step forward. In an instant, the Great Xia Empire gained 3 more god-level beings, plus my Heavenly Dragon Holy Land, at my Dragon Court City. As more and more prodigies stepped forward, the number of great saint-level experts on the Great Xia Empire's side instantly reached over 100. The number of Holy Lands that stepped forward was as high as a dozen or so, and the number of top forces that stepped forward from the Holy Land alone reached over 100. Therefore, the number of beings at the Saint King level and the Saintly Realm instantly reached tens of thousands. Of course, there were also some beings who reached the True King level, but their actions did not have much effect. However, as more and more prodigies stepped forward, the number of those who stood by and watched the show also increased significantly. After all, many prodigies do not intend to participate in this great battle. For example, the Heavenly Sword Holy Land and the Heavenly Profound Holy Land, among other holy lands, do not plan to participate in this great battle. They were simply observing the great battle from a distance. As the number of prodigies stepping forward increased, the faces of the students from the Heavenly God Academy also turned somber. After all, they hadn't expected so many holy lands to stand on the side of the Great Xia Empire, which instantly enraged them. At this moment, 2 quasi-emperors from the Heaven-Mending Pavilion slowly arrived at this place. Therefore, all 4 of the continent's top powers except for the Heavenly God Academy were now facing off against the Heavenly God Academy, which was also one of the 4 top powers. However, the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy did not show any worry on their faces at this time, because the quasi-emperors on their side still had the upper hand. Therefore, they naturally didn't show much worry on their faces. More importantly, their great sage-level experts still hold the upper hand. They only lack the advantage against Saint King-level experts. After all, although the beings below the great sage level from the Heavenly God Academy have been heading this way, their numbers are only a few thousand, which is far less than the tens of thousands. Do you think you can defeat our Heavenly God Academy with your bunch of ants? That's wishful thinking. Ants are ants after all. No matter how many there are, they will be completely crushed by us. At this moment, a powerful expert at the late stage of Quasi-Emperor level from the Heavenly God Academy slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes filled with intense killing intent. Clearly, he intends to kill all these prodigies. After all, those who dare to resist the Heavenly God Academy will not benefit from it. The only real solution is to kill them all. In my eyes, you are just an ant. How dare a tiny ant threaten the princess of my Great Xia Empire? You are truly courting death. Just as the Quasi-Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy finished speaking, a playful voice suddenly came from the sky. At the same time, you could hear a hint of anger in that voice. The next second, a silver light appeared in the sky. This beam of light transformed into an iron hammer, appearing before the Quasi-Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy and instantly creating a huge crater in front of him. The next second, a young general dressed in silver armor appeared in the sky, exuding the pressure of a Quasi-Emperor at the peak of his realm. At the same time, he looked at the Quasi-Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with a playful and mocking expression. This humble general, Yu Yun, pays his respects to your highness the princess. After glancing at the group from the Heavenly God Academy, he turned his gaze to Chu Yenran of the Great Xia Empire, his eyes filled with respect. After hearing Yu Yun's words, Chu Yenran waved her hand at him. It turns out that this young general is Yu Fei's son, Yu Yun. Over the years, he has successfully broken through to the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm and is not far from the Great Emperor realm. At this moment, he looked towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy with a murderous glint in his eyes, because he did not expect that these quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy would dare to threaten his princess. The people from the Heavenly God Academy frowned after sensing the aura of a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm emanating from Yu Yun. They hadn't expected that anyone from the Great Xia Empire could be a quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm. Of course, everyone else's eyes were also on Yu Yun at this moment, because they obviously did not expect Yu Yun's strength to have reached such a terrifying level. Moreover, there are records about Yu Yun within their forces. After all, he has been following the current human emperor from the very beginning. Chapter 780 General Zhang Liao, the general who guards the north, arrives. Gao Shun arrives with the trapped camp. Therefore, the aura emanating from him, belonging to the quasi-emperor realm, shocked everyone present. However, although the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy frowned after sensing the aura of the quasi-emperor realm on Yu Yun, it was only the addition of one more quasi-emperor at the peak of the realm, so it didn't have a particularly big impact on them. After all, the quasi-emperor level experts on the side of the Heavenly God Academy still maintain the advantage. However, just as the quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy were feeling fortunate, a terrifying light streaked across the sky. The next second, a large sword slowly fell from the sky. Then, a burly middle-aged man slowly landed in the center of the battlefield. His eyes swept calmly over the people from the Heavenly God Academy before he leisurely turned his gaze to Chu Yenran in front of him. Then he slowly approached Chu Yenran and bowed respectfully to her. This humble General Zhang Liao greets Your Highness the Princess. After he finished speaking, the aura of a late-stage quasi-emperor emanating from his body erupted. Chu Yenran nodded to Zhang Liao the moment she saw him, but she didn't know much about him. Because Zhang Liao was the general who guards the north in their Great Xia Empire, he had always been a deterrent to the north of the Great Xia Empire, so Chu Yenran naturally didn't know much about him. However, this time Zhang Liao returned to Chang'an, the capital of the Great Xia Empire, not only because of the emperor's secret realm, but also because Chu Fan felt that Zhang Liao's strength should be improved. That's why he was summoned back to the Great Xia Empire to help him quickly break through to the Great Emperor realm. The main reason he entered the Great Emperor's secret realm this time was because the Emperor asked him to protect Princess Wu Shuang and Princess Yenran within the Great Emperor's secret realm. After all, even quasi-emperors can enter the Great Emperor's secret realm. So how could the Great Xia Empire allow its quasi-emperors to remain idle? As Zhang Liao unleashed his late-stage quasi-emperor aura, a solemn expression returned to the faces of everyone present. Murong Zhantian and Zhan Zun finally smiled. The increasing number of powerful figures in the Great Xia Empire was naturally a good thing for them. At this moment, Xian Yuanpa looked at the two people who appeared beside him with a burning desire. He was very fond of the army and naturally knew a lot about the generals of the Great Xia Empire and their achievements. Before the people from the Heavenly God Academy could speak, a streak of light slowly streaked across the sky, and then an army slowly appeared before them. Although this army numbered only 800, the aura emanating from each of them had reached the Saint King realm, and many of them had even reached the Great Saint realm. Standing at the very front was a middle-aged man holding a long spear. After appearing, he smiled in Chu Yenran's direction before quickly approaching her. As for the army behind him, it stood directly in the sky, looking down at the students of the Heavenly God Academy with great majesty. This humble general, Gao Shun, greets Your Highness the Princess. At the same time, the middle-aged man cupped his hands to Chu Yenran and spoke, his eyes filled with respect. After hearing Gao Shun's words, Chu Yenran finally smiled and then slowly walked up to Gao Shun. Uncle Gao, I didn't expect you to enter the Great Emperor's secret realm this time as well. At the same time, she spoke to Gao Shun with a gentle tone. The reason why Chu Yenran was so familiar with Gao Shun was mainly because Gao Shun was the commander of the Imperial Guards of Chang'an City. Therefore, Chu Yenran and Chu Wuang were naturally very familiar with Gao Shun. Your Highness, I heard that when Yuan and the others are coming, so I requested that the Emperor enter the secret realm to protect Your Highness Wu Shuang and Your Highness. After hearing Chu Yenran's words, Gao Shun smiled and spoke to her. The usually serious Gao Shun had begun to smile as he accompanied Chu Wu Shuang, Chu Yenran, and the others as they grew up. After he finished speaking, he slowly turned his gaze to Zhang Liao. The two of them already had a good relationship, so when he saw Zhang Liao, he naturally had a smile on his face. After hearing Gao Shun's words, Chu Yenran nodded to him before turning her gaze to Zhang Liao. Since Uncle Gao is here to see General Zhang Liao, then let Uncle Gao and General Zhang Liao catch up after this great battle is over. After Chu Yenran finished speaking, she returned to the army, once again acting like a high and mighty princess. Of course, she was originally a princess who was high and mighty. After hearing her words, Zhang Liao cupped his hands in a respectful gesture towards her. The two then stood together. Although Gao Shun's aura was only at the mid-stage of quasi-emperor level, the aura he exuded while leading this army was extremely terrifying. Then everyone turned their attention to Gao Shun and the army behind him. The weakest member of Gao Shun's army had reached the late stage of Saint King, which showed just how powerful this army was. Just as Gao Shun made his appearance, a terrifying aura began to slowly emerge in the sky. More importantly, this terrifying aura was mixed with a terrifying killing intent. It was as if a true god of war was about to descend upon the world. Then a long sword appeared in the sky, and with unstoppable force, it charged directly toward the quasi-emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Upon seeing this, the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy quickly joined forces to defend against the long sword flying from the sky, because they could feel that the power emanating from this long sword was extremely terrifying, even far exceeding the attack of an ordinary quasi-emperor level expert. With the combined efforts of the 10 quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy, their terrifying aura completely withstood the long sword. Then the long sword slowly slid down from the sky and landed in front of the people from the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire, before sticking itself into the ground unremarkably. At the same time, they could see that the long sword was quite ordinary, but when Chu Yenran saw it, a smile appeared on her face. She was like a blooming flower. Because she recognized the long sword, it meant that she had also recognized the identity of its owner. This is the Northern Liang Blade. In their Great Xia Empire, only one army knows how to use it, and besides the white-robed general of the Great Xia Empire, there is only one other person with such power. Chapter 781, the peerless demon Lord Chu Luchan and quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire arrive one after another. Of course, the white-robed general of their Great Xia Empire preferred the spear, and because of the white-robed general's strength, he could not enter the Great Emperor's secret realm. Therefore, Chu Yenran naturally guessed who was about to arrive in the sky. Just as Chu Yenran guessed who was about to descend from the sky, everyone's gaze turned to the sky, because they could feel the terrifying killing intent emanating from the long sword that had just appeared. The killing intent seemed to condense into a long river of time, and such terrifying killing intent naturally shocked these geniuses. Even the powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy looked up at the sky, eager to see who this killing god of the Great Xia Empire was. At the same time, a blood-red killing intent appeared in the sky, and a very loud and muffled sound came out. Trying to harm the princess of my Great Xia Empire? You really have no sense of mortality. As this loud, deep sound slowly rang out, a plump figure appeared in the sky. His fat flab was trembling, but even so, one could feel the terrifying killing intent emanating from his body. His appearance alone was chilling, especially the terrifying and overwhelming killing intent emanating from him. The next second, he fell directly from the sky. Then he quickly came to Chu Yenran's side. This humble general, Chu Luchan, greets your highness the princess. Without hesitation, he spoke directly to Chu Yenran, his eyes filled with respect. Chu Yenran smiled instantly as she looked at Chu Luchan in front of her. Uncle Chu, I didn't expect you to come too. Chu Yenran's eyes naturally held a hint of joy as she looked at Chu Luchan, who often teased her. Then she walked up to Chu Luchan and spoke to him, her eyes showing no trace of joy, but rather a mixture of other emotions. Your Highness, Lu Qiuer was delayed for a while in the Emperor's secret realm. Otherwise, she would have arrived long ago. At this moment, Chu Luchan also withdrew the murderous intent from his face, and then looked at Chu Yenran with a smile, as if the god of death exuding terrifying killing intent was not him at all. At that moment, he seemed like a kind and honest middle-aged man. Upon seeing this, the expressions on the faces of the assembled prodigies twitched. They hadn't expected that this person, who had appeared like a god of death at the very beginning, would be so comical. After all, when Chu Luchan first appeared, they thought he was some kind of god of death. They never expected to see him like this, which instantly shattered the lofty image they had of him. At this moment, Xian Yuanpa looked at Chu Luchan with excitement. Others might not know what the fat man in front of them represented, but he knew very well what the fat man in front of him represented. At the same time, he was also very clear about the fat man's status in the entire Great Xia Empire. Junior Xian Yuanpa greets General Chu. Without hesitation, he went directly to Chu Luchan and bowed to him. His eyes also held a hint of excitement and agitation. Upon seeing this, Chu Luchan simply nodded to him, continuing to maintain his aloof and superior image. However, his image was completely ruined during his conversation with Chu Yenran, but even so, no one present dared to laugh at him. They were even terrified of this god of death who exuded a terrifying killing intent. With Chu Luchan's arrival, the quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy present also showed worry in their eyes. They were even wondering whether they should return to the formation. After all, the people who come from the Great Xia Empire are all ruthless, so now they can only rely on formations to protect themselves. Just as the Heavenly God Academy was still worried about Chu Luchan in front of them, a very fierce aura came from the sky, and then a young man holding a long spear slowly appeared in the sky. His eyes held a calm expression, but besides that calmness, a hint of killing intent also appeared when he looked at the group of quasi-emperors and great saints from the Heavenly God Academy. The next second, he appeared directly in front of Chu Yenran. Young Erlang of the Great Xia Empire greets Your Highness the Princess. At the same time, his voice slowly rang out in front of Chu Yenran, and the next second, he appeared directly in front of everyone from the Heavenly God Academy. The aura of a late-stage quasi-emperor erupted from his body, and when he looked at Yang Chelong, he nodded to him. He was Yang Erlang, one of the Yang family generals. Although he was not the strongest among them, he still commanded considerable respect within the family. After all, apart from Yang Dalong, he was the oldest among the generals of the Yang family. When Chu Yenran saw Yang Erlang arrive, she nodded to him and softly called him Uncle Yang. After Yang Erlang arrived, the top experts of the Great Xia Empire slowly appeared in the sky once again. Yang Dalong of the Great Xia Empire greets Your Highness the Princess. Yang Sanlang of the Great Xia Empire greets Your Highness the Princess. At the same time, several late-stage quasi-emperors from the Yang family also arrived. However, Yang Sailang and Yang Lulang, who were protecting Chu Wuang, did not appear, nor did Yang Wulong, who was by Chu Chen's side. Since neither of them has appeared, their protectors have naturally not appeared either. Soon, the number of quasi-emperor level experts in the Great Xia Empire on Chu Yenran's side began to increase slowly. Meanwhile, when the Heavenly God Academy saw that the number of quasi-emperor level experts on Chu Yenran's side was slowly increasing, a look of worry appeared on their faces. Clearly, they hadn't expected the Great Xia Empire to have so many quasi-emperor level experts entering this secret realm this time. It even made them feel a little unreal. Without hesitation, the quasi-emperors and great saints from the Heavenly God Academy entered the formation. Clearly, they now believe that only this Dao formation can protect them from being killed. However, as the number of quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire increased, the number of quasi-emperors at the Heavenly God Academy also began to increase slowly. After all, quite a few quasi-emperors and great saints from the Heavenly God Academy entered this secret realm this time. As the numbers on both sides began to grow slowly, the eyes of all the prodigies in the various factions were filled with shock. Clearly, they hadn't expected the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire to have such terrifying resources. Chapter 782, The Powerful Chu Luchan, on the eve of the Great Battle. Even the War God Temple and other top forces that support the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family did not expect that so many top experts will be mobilized this time. As the top experts from both sides begin to emerge, the Great War between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy is about to begin. The geniuses outside, who did not support any particular faction, all looked on with anticipation. Because after this great battle, they might receive the Emperor's legacy. However, if the two forces do not wage war, it will be extremely difficult for them to obtain the Emperor's inheritance. As the number of quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire gradually increased, the sky was soon filled with many top-tier powerhouses. However, at this moment, several quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy reappeared in the sky. As soon as they appeared, they immediately noticed the top experts from the Great Xia Empire. However, it can be seen that these quasi-emperors looked at Chu Yenran and the others with a hint of contempt in their eyes, even though Chu Yenran already had many quasi-emperors by her side at this time. However, the number of quasi-emperors on her side is still less than that on the Heavenly God Academy side. Uncle Yang killed them. Seeing the disdain in the eyes of these quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy, Chu Yenran did not hesitate at all and directly gave an order to Yang Chelong in front of her. It should be noted that although Chu Yenran was not particularly domineering, she was still a princess of the Great Xia Empire and often accompanied Chu Luchan and others, so she naturally carried a touch of arrogance and killing intent. Why would General Yang need to get involved in such a small matter? Just leave it to Lu Qiu. Upon hearing Chu Yenran's words, Chu Luchan's face immediately lit up with interest. Without the slightest hesitation, he drew his Northern Liang blade. With a surging killing intent in his eyes, he headed towards the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. The next second, the long sword in his hand instantly drew a silver-white arc. Within this silvery white arc of light, numerous red, sorrowful clouds were also scattered. The next second, the terrifying blade energy went directly towards the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. Of the three quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy, Only one is at the mid-stage of quasi-emperor level, and the other two are at the early stage of quasi-emperor level. So when faced with such terrifying killing intent, their faces turned pale instantly. Before they even had a chance to defend themselves, Chu Luchan's longsword appeared in front of the three of them, and then this terrifying attack landed directly on them. In an instant, the three quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy were sent flying backward. Having done all this, Chu Luchan, wielding his Northern Liang blade, charged directly at the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy, instantly unleashing a terrifying aura emanating from him. The next second, without the slightest hesitation, he vanished into the sky. Of course, several quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy also disappeared from the sky along with him. Clearly, they have moved to the other side of the battle. The others from the Heavenly God Academy were furious upon witnessing this scene, and some even wanted to wage war against the Great Xia Empire. However, they also knew that if they were to go to war with the Great Xia Empire now, they would definitely go outside the formation, which would render the formation they had set up largely ineffective. Although Yang Qilong had a way to break the formation, the people of the Heavenly God Academy did not believe in his method. Therefore, they were still waiting for the arrival of the quasi-emperor level expert from the Heavenly God Academy and the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. The great battle in the sky ended quickly, and a short while later, Chu Luchan slowly walked out of the void. At the same time, it can be seen that he is holding 3 heads in his hands, and these 3 heads are the 3 quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. After doing all this, Chu Luchan threw the heads of the 3 quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy in front of the formation, his eyes filled with contempt and disdain. Anyone who dares to offend Her Highness the Princess of my Great Xia Empire shall be killed without mercy. After he finished speaking, he completely suppressed the murderous intent on his face, and then came to Chu Yenran again. This scene left all the geniuses present speechless, because they never expected that such a decisive and ruthless person would behave like this in front of Chu Yenran. However, they also instantly branded Chu Luchan as someone not to be trifled with. After all, this guy could kill even a quasi-emperor level expert so easily, so these so-called geniuses probably wouldn't even have a chance to resist him. Meanwhile, Xian Yuanpa, standing behind him, was filled with excitement. He had finally witnessed just how powerful his idol truly was. Of course, Xian Yuanpa has many idols, but no matter what, it can't affect his ultimate idol, who is the contemporary human Emperor Chu Fan. As for other idols, they are the people he wants to become, such as the 7 generals of the Yang family, who are also his idols. General Zhao Zilong in silver robes and white horse was also his idol. General Lu Bu, the demon god descending to earth, was also his idol, and so was General Tian Bao, or perhaps General Silverhammer. Anyone who is even slightly capable is Xian Yuanpa's idol. After the 3 quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy were killed, the experts from the Heavenly God Academy looked at Chu Luchan with a gloomy expression. At this moment, they wished they could kill Chu Luchan completely, but they also knew that Chu Luchan's strength was beyond their current ability to kill. And now they are waiting for an opportunity. As the Heavenly God Academy waited for its opportunity, time passed little by little. During this period, 5 quasi-emperors from the Xianyuan family appeared, bringing the total to 7, including the 2 who appeared much earlier. However, this was still far less than the entire Heavenly God Academy. As for the entire Heaven-Mending Pavilion, only 4 quasi-emperors appeared, but the number of their great saint-level experts reached over 1 million. Therefore, more and more top experts appeared in front of the Great Emperor's tomb. Moreover, the quasi-emperors and great saints of the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion did not hesitate to stand on the side of the Great Xia Empire, since they were originally on the same side as the Great Xia Empire. Of course, top experts from the Heavenly God Academy were also constantly arriving at this time. However, neither the Great Xia Empire nor the Heavenly God Academy chose to launch a final attack, because they were both very clear that the Great Xia Empire was waiting for that peerless prince. And their Heavenly God Academy was also waiting for this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. Chapter 783 Gathering before the Emperor's tomb, Chu Wuang arrives. As time goes by little, the situation on both sides is becoming increasingly intense, although a major battle has not yet begun. However, it is also clear from the current situation that this battle will be extremely fierce. Meanwhile, the number of powerful individuals at the quasi-emperor level in the Great Xia Empire is also increasing, and they are now capable of breaking this formation. Of course, this is based on Yang Qilong's explanation. Otherwise, according to the conjecture of the Heavenly God Academy, breaking this formation would require a great emperor-level expert. No matter how many quasi-emperor-level experts there are, they would not be able to break this formation. However, neither the Great Xia Empire nor the Heavenly God Academy chose to take action at this time, because everyone knew they were waiting for the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. And the geniuses and great saints of these holy lands finally understood the main reason why the entire world, or even the entire universe, is divided into three top forces, while their holy lands can only be classified as first-rate forces. Because they now clearly understand just how terrifying the strength of the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire truly is, and the existence of quasi-emperors and god-level beings from the third, most powerful Xianyuan family alone far exceeds their imagination. Not to mention the two behemoths, the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire. Even the great saints in the Temple of War had expressions of shock in their eyes. They realized that although they had joined the great battle, they were currently of no use in it. Unless a quasi-emperor level being emerges among them, these great saint level beings alone can at most hold off some great saints from the Heavenly God Academy. However, when they saw the powerful quasi-emperors at the peak of their realm in the Great Xia Empire, their eyes were filled with excitement. They believed they had made the right bet. They thought that the numerous powerful quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire would be able to break the formation. As long as the Great Xia Empire and the Xianyuan family could defeat the Heavenly God Academy, their bet would naturally be successful. Those geniuses and great sages who did not participate in this great battle had worried expressions in their eyes, because no matter which side won, it would not benefit them. Because these so-called prodigies did not help the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy, but now they also know that they have no choice in the matter. Both the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy far exceeded their expectations. They could be wiped out by any top expert sent by the other side, so they naturally wouldn't dare to make such a choice now. The main reason why those who made this choice to help the Great Xia Empire was that they had a do-or-die mentality. After all, there cannot be two top powers in this universe unless the two powers are friendly. Otherwise, these two forces would definitely engage in a major war. More importantly, the actions of the Heavenly God Academy are incomprehensible to them. Just the last time the Heavenly God Academy and the Supreme Being in the Forbidden Zone seemed to have joined forces to fight against the Great Xia Empire, they had no goodwill towards the Heavenly God Academy. This is why they stand so firmly on the side of the Great Xia Empire. After all, they are afraid that if the Supreme Being in the Forbidden Zone launches a dark turmoil, the Heavenly God Academy will help the Supreme Being in the Forbidden Zone. Just as everyone was waiting for this great battle to begin, a terrifying aura swept across the sky. Then, a white tiger suddenly appeared in the sky. The moment the white tiger appeared in the sky, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from its body. Although the white tiger's aura was only at the Great Sage Perfection realm, it still shocked the entire world. At the same time, these geniuses did not expect that a white tiger at the Great Sage Perfection realm would appear in the sky. Of course, the Heavenly God Academy did not care much about it. What they cared about was the figure behind the white tiger. As the white tiger slowly appeared in the sky, many figures also appeared behind it. The figure standing at the very front exuded an aura of arrogance, even though the aura emanating from him was only at the Great Sage realm. Even those who were also at the Great Sage level couldn't help but want to submit when they saw this figure. He seemed to be a born king. At this moment, the three Great Sage-level geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy instantly recognized who this figure was. Chu Wuang, you've finally arrived. Then, one of the geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy couldn't help but speak directly to the sky. As his voice fell, the figures in the sky slowly descended into the heavens. The assembled prodigies finally understood who this person, who possessed an innate aura of dominance, was, and they instantly knew that a great battle was about to unfold. After all, the protagonist of the Great Xia Empire has arrived, so the great war between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire is bound to begin. Meanwhile, many prodigies were curious about this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, because many of them had never seen this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire before entering the secret realm. Even if they had seen them before, it was only from afar, so naturally, they had curious expressions on their faces now. It seems that everyone from the Heavenly God Academy is here. In that case, let everyone from the Heavenly God Academy stay here. Chu Wuang then slowly glanced at the group of people from the Heavenly God Academy within the formation before speaking in a leisurely tone, as if issuing a final command to these powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy. It was as simple as the Grim Reaper issuing a death notice to someone who was about to die. The students from the Heavenly God Academy were furious upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, as they had never expected him to look down on them so much. At this moment, Chu Wuang ignored the people from the Heavenly God Academy and instead led the people around him toward Chu Yenran. Since his sister Chu Yenran was here, he naturally wanted to come to Chu Yenran's side. As Chu Wuang arrived at Chu Yenran's side, the generals surrounding Chu Yenran bowed and saluted in Chu Wuang's direction. "We have met your Highness Wuang." Their voices resounded throughout the sky, making them known to everyone present. At the same time, it can be heard from these voices that many of them are excited. Clearly, they're very excited to see their peerless prince. Chapter 784 The Great Battle is about to begin. Chu Wuang's contempt for the Heavenly God Academy. When Chu Wuang saw the generals standing in front of him, he simply waved his hand at them. At the same time, his domineering yet authoritative voice slowly rang out. Generals, you may dispense with the formalities. As soon as he finished speaking, all the generals present stood up. At the same time, the terrifying aura emanating from them caused the laws of the entire space to become extremely strange. Even the surrounding atmosphere began to surge violently. Thank you, Your Highness. At the same time, their voices were also transmitted directly. Everyone present was shocked by this scene. Even the divine beast White Tiger, which had been subdued by Chu Wuang, looked at the quasi-emperor level powerhouses in front of it with awe. He originally thought that having two powerful quasi-emperors at the peak of their realm by his side was already the pinnacle of his abilities, but he never expected that the prince he followed would also have so many top-tier generals by his side. Moreover, each of them had already reached the quasi-emperor realm, which instantly filled his eyes with a sense of shock. At the same time, he was also wondering what his prince's identity was, that he could make so many quasi-emperors submit to him. Of course, although the shock was intense, the White Tiger's eyes were not very expressive at the moment, because he also saw that the enemy they were about to face was not weak. The Azure Dragon, held by a powerful figure from the Heavenly God Academy, was even more shocked by this scene. Although it had been quite astonished from the beginning by the sheer number of powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy, it was now even more shocked by the so-called Great Xia Empire. Because the strength of the Great Xia Empire now seems to have surpassed that of the Heavenly God Academy. And more importantly, many of the quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire have reached the perfect quasi-emperor realm. It should be noted that those who are able to enter this secret realm are all under 1,000 years old. Those who have broken through to the quasi-emperor perfection realm within 1,000 years should not find it particularly difficult to break through to the Great Emperor realm. His eyes widened in shock as he thought about this. At the same time, he was also very curious whether the Great Xia Empire would ultimately win this great battle, or whether the powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy who had captured him would achieve the final victory. Of course, in the heart of this Azure Dragon, he naturally favored that the Great Xia Empire would achieve final victory, since that way he might be able to escape alive. Furthermore, he did not wish for the Heavenly God Academy to achieve final victory. As for the prodigies outside, they watched this scene with great excitement, because they all understood that this great battle would begin immediately with the arrival of the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. Moreover, the victor of this great battle will become the owner of the great emperor's tomb. So naturally, their eyes are filled with excitement. At the same time, they also wanted to see if they could actually obtain the emperor's inheritance this time. Or rather, you might get some leftover soup or water. As for those top geniuses and great sages who have already chosen to stand on the side of the Great Xia Empire, they are now looking forward to their peerless prince leading them to defeat the Heavenly God Academy. This proves that their choice was correct. Chu Wuang slowly walked out under the expectant gazes of everyone, looking calmly at the people of the Heavenly God Academy below. At this moment, he naturally learned the origin of the formation in front of him from Yang Qilong, and at the same time he also learned from Yang Qilong the real way to break the formation. Of course, Yang Luang also said that he could give it a try. After all, Yang Luang has now reached the perfect realm of Quasi-Emperor and is only one step away from the realm of Great Emperor. He naturally wanted to try whether he could forcefully break through the formation with his current strength. However, Chu Wuang did not give them an answer. Instead, he slowly turned his gaze to the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. The three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy are all at the Great Saint realm, but their status is clearly higher than that of the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. After all, these three prodigies are all descendants of powerful emperors in the Heavenly God Academy, one of whom is even the descendant of a three-generation emperor, so their identities are naturally not particularly numerous. However, compared to Chu Wuang, their status was naturally weaker, or even much weaker. After all, Chu Wuang is the peerless princess of the Great Xia Empire. I thought that the Heavenly God Academy had an absolute chance of winning this decisive battle with the Great Xia Empire. I didn't expect that the Heavenly God Academy would actually choose to be a coward. It seems that father was right after all. The Heavenly God Academy is never worthy to be an enemy of the Great Xia Empire. Chu Wuang looked at the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy and spoke leisurely, while a hint of contempt could be seen in his eyes. Chu Wuang naturally learned everything about the Heavenly God Academy from his father, Emperor Chu Fan. At the same time, Chu Fan also told him in a very domineering way that although the Heavenly God Academy was quite strong, it was still a little short of being able to truly fight against the Great Xia Empire, because the strength of the Great Xia Empire far surpasses that of the Heavenly God Academy. After all, during this period, the Great Xia Empire also summoned some top-tier experts. Two of them even reached the level of true immortals. So the number of true immortals in the Great Xia Empire now far exceeds everyone's imagination. Even the top experts in the Heavenly God Academy and the Forbidden Zones didn't know how many true immortal-level experts there were in the Great Xia Empire. They may have always suspected that the true immortal-level powerhouse of the Great Xia Empire was the Emperor, that mortal immortal. Of course, even the Emperor's true strength was not entirely clear to them. Perhaps it could be said that the current Heavenly God Academy and the remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone believe that the true powerhouse of the Great Xia Empire is a remnant immortal-level existence. Even so, neither the Heavenly God Academy nor the remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone chose to make a move. Of course, the main reason is not because the strong people of the Heavenly God Academy and the strong people in the Forbidden Zone think they can't beat a crippled immortal, but because the real path to immortality is about to begin, so they naturally won't mess things up at this moment. However, when the true path to immortality opens, both the Heavenly God Academy and the powerful figures in the Forbidden Zones will go to war with the Great Xia Empire. At that time, only the victors could truly access the path to immortality. However, the Great Xia Empire is not worried at all. In fact, the preparations that the Great Xia Empire is making now are not to deal with the Heavenly God Academy and the remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone. Chu Fan's preparations are all to ensure that after successfully entering the immortal realm, he can continue to stabilize the Great Xia Empire's position. Chapter 785, The Provocation of the Quasi-Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Chu Wuang activates the formation-breaking technique. Since no one knows the true state of the immortal realm, Chu Fan is naturally preparing for the real war there. This is why the top experts of the Great Xia Empire have been in seclusion during this period. Moreover, although the Great Xia Empire possesses 3 true immortals and 1 mortal immortal, it lacks a single immortal-level warrior, which is why the Great Xia Empire has been in seclusion for cultivation. Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, the 3 prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy instantly displayed an expression of anger. Clearly, they hadn't expected Chu Wuang to dare insult their Heavenly God Academy like this. But of course, what Chu Wuang said was also true. After all, they are currently holed up in the formation set up by the Heavenly God Academy. The main reason is that the number of quasi-emperors in the Great Xia Empire is increasing, and more importantly, many of them have reached the perfect quasi-emperor level. Even if the Heavenly God Academy were to defeat these quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire, the final outcome would be a lose-lose situation, which is not what the Heavenly God Academy wants to see. Therefore, they naturally do not intend to step out of the formation. I've heard that there's a very powerful formation master in the Great Xia Empire named Zhao Gao Luo Wang, who is also the Prime Minister of the Great Xia Empire. Could it be that you, the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, haven't learned the formation techniques of this Prime Minister of the Great Xia Empire? Or is it that, apart from Zhao Gao Luo Wang, there is no one else in your Great Xia Empire who can break the formation? While the faces of the several great masters of the Heavenly God Academy were still filled with anger, a late-stage quasi-emperor expert from the Heavenly God Academy slowly stepped forward and said that the Heavenly God Academy had been investigating news about the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, they had naturally heard of Zhao Gao Luo Wang, the Prime Minister of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, the current late-stage quasi-emperor of the Heavenly God Academy uses Zhao Gao Luo Wang to mock Chu Wuang, because the only true array master in the Great Xia Empire is Zhao Gao Luo Wang. How dare you? How dare you be so disrespectful to His Highness? You have no sense of mortality. No sooner had the words of this late-stage quasi-emperor expert from the Heavenly God Academy fallen than Chu Luchan, who was standing in front of Chu Fan, could no longer hold back. Holding the Northern Liang blade, he stepped forward with a look of anger in his eyes and said to the late-stage quasi-emperor expert from the Heavenly God Academy. After he finished speaking, he released a terrifying killing intent. Without hesitation, he turned around and looked at Chu Wuang, his eyes filled with seriousness as he spoke. Please allow Lu Qiu'er to break the formation, Your Highness. After he finished speaking, he exuded a terrifying aura, and his eyes also showed a stubborn look. Seeing this, the others also turned their gazes to Chu Luchan. After all, they were very clear about the killing god in front of them. At the same time, they also wanted to see if this god of death could break the formation set up by the Heavenly God Academy in front of them. General Yang, 10 beings at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm can break this formation, right? After hearing Chu Luchan's words, Chu Wuang did not reply to Chu Luchan directly, but instead slowly looked at Yang Qilong beside her and spoke. However, it was clear that there was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. Your Highness, it is indeed possible for 10 experts at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm to break this formation, but only if no one disturbs them. Otherwise, 10 experts at the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm would not be enough to break this formation. After hearing Chu Wuang's words, Yang Qilang looked at Chu Wuang seriously and spoke. After he finished speaking, he stared intently at the people from the Heavenly God Academy and the formation in which they were located. He only needed 10 Quasi-Emperor level beings to break the formation in front of him, of course, beings at the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm. At the same time, the people from the Heavenly God Academy need not interfere with his breaking the formation. Otherwise, these 10 beings at the peak of the Quasi-Emperor realm would not only have to break the formation, but also face the Quasi-Emperors from the Heavenly God Academy, and thus would be unable to break the formation. In that case, I will leave these people from the Heavenly God Academy to you. You will lead the 9 Quasi-Emperor level beings to break the formation. After hearing Yang Qilang's assurance, Chu Wuang nodded to Yang Qilang and spoke, his eyes showing no sign of worry. He still had great faith in the generals of the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, he naturally believed that Yang Qilang could lead the top experts of the Great Xia Empire to break the formation, while he himself would directly lead the others to stop the others from the Heavenly God Academy. Your Highness, rest assured, Qilang can definitely break the formation. After hearing Chu Wuang's words, Yang Qilang also spoke to Chu Wuang with a firm expression. After speaking, he looked at the people from the Heavenly God Academy with a murderous look on his face. After hearing the conversation between Chu Wuang and Yang Qilang, everyone knew that they were about to break the formation and that the great battle between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire was about to begin. Therefore, everyone's eyes were now fixed on the direction of the formation with a determined look. Even the war venerable's palms were sweating. Although they knew that they were merely cannon fodder in this great war, they believed that once the Heavenly God Academy achieved final victory, they would be completely annihilated. But if the Great Xia Empire is the ultimate victor in this great war, then they will achieve ultimate success, and the whole world will remember them. Moreover, with the Great Xia Empire as their leader, they naturally have no fear of retaliation from the Heavenly God Academy. Yang Lulang, Yang Xilang, Chu Luchan, Yu Yun, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Taishir Ci, Shan Xiongxin, Wang Bodong, you'll follow General Yang to break through the formation. Upon seeing Yang Qilang's unwavering resolve, Chu Wuang's face instantly revealed a domineering aura. He then directly issued an order to the powerful Quasi-Emperor at the peak of his realm from the Great Xia Empire in front of him. The experts at the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm whom he ordered this time were all quite powerful. Among them, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei had reached the pinnacle of the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm, and it wouldn't be a problem for the two of them to break through to the Great Emperor realm now. After all, Zhao Zilong and Ma Chao, 2 of the 5 Tiger Generals summoned this time, have already broken through to the Great Emperor realm, and Zhao Zilong's strength is among the top in the Great Emperor realm. The only ones who haven't broken through yet are Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, and Huang Zhong. All 3 of them are currently at the Quasi-Emperor Perfection level. Chapter 786 Yang Qilang leads the team to break through the formation, and a great battle is about to break out. However, Chu Wuang did not include Wang Zhongye among the 10 Quasi-Emperor level experts who had broken through the formation, because they also needed the combat power of Quasi-Emperor level experts. Moreover, both Shan Xiongxin and Wang Bodong are considered quite good among those at the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm. More importantly, these 2 were trained by their own father during this period. Of course, Chu Wuang was unaware that these individuals were summoned by his father during this period. He only assumed that they were trained by his father. However, their strength had also reached the perfected Quasi-Emperor realm, so they were directly sent to break the formation. As for Taishir Ci, everything he did was excellent, and Chu Wuang preferred Taishir Ci to lead troops in a battle because his ability to command troops was very strong. Although he could not compare to those real generals, he was certainly no weaker than ordinary brutes. After Chu Wuang gave the order, Yang Qilang excitedly arrived above the formation. Then, with a hint of excitement in his eyes, he landed directly into the formation. Although Yang Lulang and Yang Xilang felt somewhat helpless upon seeing this scene, they knew their 7th brother's personality, so they could only follow in his footsteps and land in the formation. As for the other powerful individuals at the Quasi-Emperor Perfection realm, they entered the formation without the slightest hesitation. Form a 10-directional formation, with each of the generals of the Great Xia Empire taking their place in a specific formation, and break the formation. At the same time, Yang Qilang's voice resounded throughout the sky. Then, 10 powerful Quasi-Emperors at the peak of their realm from the Great Xia Empire instantly formed the 10 Directions formation within the Heavenly God Academy's array. Everyone stood in a position, and instantly the entire formation of the Heavenly God Academy began to shake. At the same time, the power in their hands also surged instantly. The next second, they simultaneously launched an attack on the formation set up by these top experts from the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the seemingly indestructible formation was instantly shaken by their attack. However, the formation quickly conjured up numerous blood-red figures to block the 10 people's attack. However, this was very easy for them. With a fierce look in their eyes, they charged towards the blood-red figures. Guan Yu swung his broadsword in an instant, and the terrifying blade light shattered the row of blood-red figures in front of him. Not far from him, Zhang Fei pierced through the blood-red figures in front of him with a single spear thrust. These blood-red figures are none other than the fallen geniuses. However, the current quasi-emperor level experts of the Great Xia Empire have no intention of showing any mercy. After all, these are just the few remaining vengeful spirits of their ancestors. Taisher Ci's spear also transformed into a terrifying force, directly eliminating these blood-red figures. It can be said that the 10 quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire at the peak of their realm all displayed their divine power at this moment, and the power in their bodies quickly resolved the remnant souls in the formation. Then they continued to gather their strength to break the formation, and the terrifying power caused the entire formation to tremble continuously. The wronged souls composed of geniuses within those formations are constantly being destroyed. Although their strength was considerable due to the array's enhancement, their wronged souls were constantly being wiped out as the 10 quasi-emperor level experts of the Great Xia Empire broke through the array. Upon witnessing this scene, a look of horror instantly appeared in the eyes of the students from the Heavenly God Academy. Clearly, they had not expected that the Great Xia Empire would actually be able to break the formation. It's important to know that this formation was created by one of the top experts from their Heavenly God Academy. Even a true Great Emperor-level expert would need considerable time to break it. However, they never expected that they would be almost defeated by the 10 quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire, which instantly filled their eyes with shock. We can't let them continue, otherwise this formation might really be broken, and then we'll really have no choice but to fight them to the death. A powerful late-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy slowly looked at the Great Xia Empire's group breaking the formation and spoke, a hint of worry in his eyes. Although they have an advantage in a number of quasi-emperors, it will naturally take them some time to defeat the Great Xia Empire. It's even possible that most of their quasi-emperor level experts will perish by then. Of course, these are all the ideas of the Heavenly God Academy itself. The Great Xia Empire didn't take them seriously at all. Let's deal with these 10 quasi-emperor level beings in the Great Xia Empire first. The 3 prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy said helplessly, as they naturally understood that if they did not deal with the 10 quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire, they might not be able to defend this formation. Therefore, their only option now is to deal with the 10 quasi-emperor level experts of the Great Xia Empire first. But how could the Great Xia Empire possibly let them have their way? As soon as Chu Wuang saw the quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy about to make a move, he immediately turned his gaze to Gao Shun behind him without hesitation. General Gao, it's time for the trap camp to make their move. Then he issued his orders directly. Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, Gao Shun looked directly toward the formation without hesitation. The will to charge into battle is one of certain death. At the same time, his voice slowly rang out. And after hearing his voice, the voices of the army behind him also rose up in response to his voice. The will to charge into battle is one of certain death. The will to charge into battle is one of certain death. Without hesitation, Gao Shun led the army behind him into the formation. General Yang, General Zhang Liao, it's time for all the generals to make their move. Meanwhile, Chu Wuang was still issuing orders at a leisurely pace, his voice slowly spreading to the ears of the generals. After hearing Chu Wuang's words, the generals, who were already planning to take action, instantly showed an excited expression. Among them, Yang Dalong of the Yang family led several of his Yang family generals to attack towards the direction of the formation. Zhang Liao also charged forward, brandishing his broadsword. At the same time, the other generals of the Great Xia Empire also charged in without hesitation. Of course, even Zhang Xian and others in Yu Fei's army did not hesitate at all at this time. Although their strength is only at the mid-stage of Quasi-Emperor, they are now in no way weaker than the Quasi-Emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. All members of the Xinyuan family, listen to my command. Everyone, follow the generals of the Great Xia Empire to launch an attack and kill all the members of the Heavenly God Academy at all costs. The only late-stage Quasi-Emperor expert from the Xinyuan family slowly stepped forward and spoke. As his voice fell, the Quasi-Emperors and Great Saints of the Xinyuan family entered the formation without the slightest hesitation. Even the Saints of the Xinyuan family entered the formation without hesitation. Chapter 787 The Might of the Military Formation. powerful figures of the Great Xia Empire appear frequently. After all, this great battle concerns the honor of their family, so they naturally do not hesitate at all. After everyone from the Xianyuan family joined the battle, the Quasi-Emperor and other disciples of the Butian Pavilion also joined the battlefield without hesitation. After all, they had a friendly alliance with the Xianyuan family and the Great Xia Empire, so they naturally did not hesitate to take action. After the Butian Pavilion joined the battle, the other holy lands that had chosen to support the Great Xia Empire also joined the battle without hesitation. Of course, those who joined the battlefield directly sought out opponents from the Heavenly God Academy whose cultivation levels were similar to their own to fight. The truly top-level battles naturally required the Great Xia Empire to hold them off. The current strength of the Great Xia Empire far exceeds the imagination of the Heavenly God Academy. For example, Gao Shun is now leading his army to sweep across the land, and the terrifying aura emanating from him has shocked several quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy, because they did not expect that Gao Shun would forcibly raise his cultivation to the perfect quasi-emperor realm with the help of the army behind him. It should be understood that even a small difference in realm within the quasi-emperor realm is enormous, let alone someone like him who forcibly raised his strength to the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. However, the Heavenly God Academy also chose to use 3 mid-stage quasi-emperor level beings to resist Gao Shun's attack, while also sending out hundreds of Saint King level beings to resist the army led by Gao Shun. Unfortunately, they underestimated the army led by Gao Shun. The terrifying power of this army directly sent the group of Saint Kings from the Heavenly God Academy flying. This army's terrifying strength even directly overwhelmed the group of geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy who were at the Saint King level. Meanwhile, Gao Shun and his group were crushing the 3 mid-stage quasi-emperors from the Heavenly Divine Academy with an overwhelming force, relentlessly overwhelming them in their battle. He is using military formations to enhance his own strength. So if we want to defeat him, we must deal with the army behind him and let the great sage-level beings handle it. At this moment, a late-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy naturally noticed the changes here. Without hesitation, he spoke directly to the great saints beside him. Upon hearing the words of the late-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy, these great saints instantly understood. Subsequently, a force of over 100 great saint-level experts charged directly towards this army. Although they had all reached the great sage level, the army led by Gao Shun was not so easily defeated. Thus, the top experts from both sides instantly engaged in a fierce battle. 2 more quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy appeared before Gao Shun. Therefore, he alone held off 5 quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy, which was just enough to allow the Heavenly God Academy's experts to hold off Gao Shun. Meanwhile, the army led by Gao Shun continued to charge forward. However, the hundreds of great sage-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy managed to withstand their charge. Therefore, the great battle between Gao Shun's army and the Heavenly God Academy will not end so easily. Just as Gao Shun was leading his army in a continuous charge, a man with a dark face stood not far from him, carrying an iron whip. He looked at the quasi-emperor of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of excitement in his eyes. Of course, the most important thing was that the aura emanating from him had reached the perfect quasi-emperor realm, so he was obviously also a quasi-emperor at the perfect realm. Let me, Old Black, see if your Heavenly God Academy's quasi-emperors can really withstand me. Then, without the slightest hesitation, the dark-skinned man brandished his long whip and charged towards the quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, the power emanating from the iron whip in his hand was also extremely terrifying. Upon witnessing this scene, 2 late-stage quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy immediately appeared before him. He stared at the charcoal-faced man in front of him with a look of shock in his eyes. The man with the charcoal-like face in front of them was none other than Yu Qigong, whom Chu Fan of the Great Xia Empire had summoned during this period. Unfortunately, the strength of this summoned fellow was only at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. Even so, a being at the perfect quasi-emperor level is still considered quite remarkable. Moreover, their strength is among the top in the quasi-emperor perfection realm. Yu Qigong, wielding an iron whip, swiftly charged towards the powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy below. The iron whip in his hand transformed into a black light, striking a late-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying power sent this late-stage quasi-emperor expert from the Heavenly God Academy flying. Having accomplished this, Yu Qigong continued to wield his iron whip, charging towards another late-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God's deep courtyard. The terrifying aura emanating from him caused everyone present to hesitate to approach the battlefield, because they also knew that the strength of this charcoal-faced guy was far beyond their imagination. The two late-stage quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy were shocked and incredulous upon seeing this scene. They had clearly not expected that a mere quasi-emperor at the peak of his realm from the Great Xia Empire would possess such terrifying strength. While Yu Qigong was battling two late-stage quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy, on another front, a fat man in the mid-stage quasi-emperor level from the Great Xia Empire was carrying an axe. The axe was enormous, and he quickly raised it and launched an attack on the crowd in front of him. His opponents were two other mid-stage quasi-emperors from the Angel Academy, but they were having some trouble dealing with the axe in the fat man's hand. The fat man looked at the two quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of excitement in his eyes and spoke. The 36 axes of the Heavenly Gang. Ear cleaning. After saying that, he swung his axe directly at the man's ear. The terrifying power directly cleaved a mid-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy away. Then he continued his attack on another mid-stage quasi-emperor from the Heavenly God Academy. The power of the axe in his hand grew increasingly terrifying. The two mid-stage quasi-emperor level experts from the Heavenly God Academy also wore expressions of shock. Clearly, they hadn't expected that this fat man, a fellow quasi-emperor level expert, was stronger than them. Actually, it's not their fault. The main reason is that the fat man in front of them is Cheng Yaojin of the Great Xia Empire, and his strength is the strongest in the first three moves. After that, it became rather unremarkable. Chapter 788, Xian Yuanpa and his companions intervene. Chu Yenran saves the Azure Dragon. Of course, besides them, the 10 quasi-emperor level experts of the Great Xia Empire were also constantly breaking the formation. However, the formation set up by the Heavenly God Academy this time was not weak, which is why the 10 quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire did not break this formation so easily. Moreover, because this formation is constantly empowering the experts on the Heavenly God Academy's side, their strength is gradually being enhanced. Seeing this scene from high above, Chu Wuang's eyes showed a hint of surprise. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he charged straight ahead. However, just as he was about to charge towards the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy ahead, he saw Xian Yuanpa, the young marshal of the fiery blaze, arrive in front of him, looking at Chu Wuang with a respectful gaze. "Your Highness, those guys from the Heavenly God Academy are in our hands." After saying that, he didn't hesitate at all and immediately grabbed his spear, charging towards the three great saint-level geniuses of the Heavenly God Academy. "Wuang, as the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, you are now in charge of the entire battle, so you cannot take action. I will handle those three guys." Even Chu Chan slowly walked forward and looked at Chu Wuang. After all, Chu Wuang was the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. He needed to take charge of the overall situation and naturally did not need to take action. Then, a long sword quickly appeared in his hand, and with a determined look in his eyes, he charged towards the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, Chu Yenran saw this scene and planned to follow her royal uncle and charge towards the three great saint-level geniuses. After all, Chu Yenran didn't need to oversee the whole situation. However, just as he was about to strike, a white light was faster than her. The white figure quickly arrived beside Xian Yuanpa and the other two, and then instantly turned its gaze towards the three prodigies of the Heavenly God Academy. The white figure was none other than the White Tiger under Chu Wuang's command. Seeing such a fierce battle, he naturally couldn't hold back any longer, so he chose to take action directly. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Wuang stopped in her tracks and leisurely looked at the Azure Dragon, who was being controlled by the Angel Academy. Qinglong now appears as a young man, and he is currently only guarded by two Saint Kings from the Heavenly God Academy. However, his power is currently sealed, so he naturally cannot escape the watchful eyes of these two holy kings of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, he also saw Chu Wuang in the sky, gazing at her with a thoughtful look in his eyes. At this moment, he finally understood just how powerful the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy truly were. The number of quasi-emperor level powerhouses that appeared this time alone far exceeded his expectations. Having always lived in the secret realm, he thought that quasi-emperors were rare, but this time, the number of quasi-emperors appearing in this great battle has reached over 100. This gave him a sense that there were probably many quasi-emperor level experts outside. Is this the true power of the two top forces on the continent? If this secret realm were not forbidden from having great emperor-level beings, would these two forces have produced great emperor-level powerhouses? Then, the Azure Dragon slowly raised its head and looked up at the sky, saying something with a hint of doubt in its eyes. Of course, although his voice was very weak, the two people next to him had both reached the Saint King level, so they naturally heard the Azure Dragon's voice at this moment. Then, the two of them glanced at Qinglong with a hint of disdain in their eyes. They were, after all, the pride of the Heavenly God Academy, so they naturally knew just how powerful the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy truly were. Actually, my Heavenly God Academy doesn't care about this so-called Great Emperor's inheritance at all. Our main goal this time is to destroy this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. One of the holy kings spoke frankly, as if to him, the Heavenly God Academy had always had the upper hand in this great battle from the beginning until now. That's right. Our biggest goal this time is to deal with the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, because the outside world no longer needs a human emperor to rise again, and his human emperor father will also fall at the hands of the strongmen of my Heavenly God Academy in the near future. The other holy king was also very confident in the strength of his side, and he said with a hint of excitement in his eyes. He clearly believed that their Heavenly God Academy was strong enough to deal with the Great Xia Empire. Upon hearing the words of the two holy kings, Qinglong's face instantly showed surprise. He clearly hadn't expected that the father of the peerless prince in the sky was actually a human emperor. Although Qinglong had been in the secret realm, he knew there was a great gap between the human emperor and the great emperor, so he wanted to see just how powerful this so-called human emperor really was. Is that so? I think the one that will be destroyed in the end is the Heavenly God Academy. Just after the two holy kings finished speaking, a clear, cold voice came from beside them. Who? Upon hearing that cold voice, the two holy kings turned around instantly, their eyes filled with shock as they looked around. However, he soon saw a stunningly beautiful woman appear before him, her face carrying a hint of coldness. At the same time, the terrifying aura emanating from the woman at this moment also left the two of them in disbelief. Chu Yenran, how'd you end up here? Upon seeing the woman before them, the two instantly recognized her identity. Then, the two holy kings of the Heavenly God Academy looked at Chu Yenran with disbelief in their eyes and asked her a question. At the same time, one can see that the two holy kings of the Heavenly God Academy have very strong wariness in their eyes. You two dare to speak ill of my father, the Emperor. You deserve to die. After hearing the holy king's words, Chu Yenran waved her hand at him, and then a terrifying flame instantly appeared inside her body. The next second, this terrifying flame transformed into two beams of fire, which landed on the two holy kings, instantly burning them to ashes. Now that Chu Yenran has reached the late stage of the Great Saint Realm, it would be very easy for her to deal with the two minor saint kings. After doing all this, Chu Yenran slowly turned her gaze to the azure dragon in front of her. Without hesitation, Chu Yenran took Qinglong away. Chapter 789 Azure Dragon follows. 3 of the 4 divine beasts gather. Azure Dragon's Revenge. Soon, Chu Yenran brought Qinglong to Chu Wuang's side. As for why Chu Yenran brought the Azure Dragon to Chu Wuang's side, it was mainly because Chu Wuang felt that the 4 divine beasts were all good beings, so he decided to bring the Azure Dragon to his side. After learning of Chu Wuang's thoughts, Chu Yenran went directly to Qinglong's side without any hesitation. This is why she heard the two holy kings of the Heavenly God Academy speaking ill of her father. Without hesitation, Chu Yenran dealt with the two holy kings of the Heavenly God Academy and then brought the Azure Dragon to Chu Wuang's side. When Qinglong arrived at Chu Wuang's side, he knew that it was this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire who had saved him. So he bowed respectfully to the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire. Qinglong thanks your highness for saving my life. After speaking, the Azure Dragon turned its gaze to the White Tiger and the Black Tortoise, who were engaged in a fierce battle. At the same time, he also guessed that Xuanwu and Baihu had probably already submitted to this peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire, or that the two divine beasts, Xuanwu and Baihu, had become his followers. Your talent is remarkable. Join my Great Xia Empire, and I guarantee you will become an emperor. Upon hearing Qinglong's words, Chu Wuang spoke directly to Qinglong, her eyes conveying a sense of calm and indifference. Of course, even if the Azure Dragon in front of him did not agree to join the Great Xia Empire, Chu Wuang would not be disappointed. After all, he just wanted to see if he could subdue the 4 divine beasts. He also felt a little sorry that the Phoenix clan had not left any descendants. Qinglong is willing to follow your highness. Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, Qinglong bowed to Chu Wuang without hesitation and spoke. In fact, after witnessing the strength of the Great Xia Empire, he lost all desire to resist. Moreover, he also wanted to take revenge on those people from the Heavenly God Academy who had done this to him. Moreover, this peerless prince already has 2 of the 4 divine beasts by his side, so what harm is there in him following this prince as well? General D, release the seal on him. Seeing that Qinglong was so sensible, Chu Wuang nodded to Qinglong and then spoke to a middle-aged man wearing a mask beside him. Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, the middle-aged man wearing a mask bowed to Chu Wuang. Then, An extremely terrifying aura instantly emanated from his body, and this terrifying aura instantly flowed into the Azure Dragon's body. Then, in an instant, it broke through the seal within the Azure Dragon's body, allowing its cultivation to be restored once more. Azure Dragon had already reached the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. Having recovered his cultivation, he naturally reached the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. Upon regaining his cultivation, Azure Dragon's face instantly lit up with an expression of excitement. At the same time, the Azure Dragon clan is inherently very regenerative. Therefore, his injuries are now slowly being healed by cyan light. In just a short while, all his injuries were healed. His gaze also sharpened. However, Qinglong soon turned his gaze to the several great sage-level powerhouses on the battlefield. There was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. If you want revenge, then go for it. They're all going to die this time anyway. Chu Wuang naturally saw the killing intent in Qinglong's eyes. Then he silently nodded at the Azure Dragon. At the same time, his gaze drifted leisurely towards the group of great sages. "Thank you, Your Highness." Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, a look of joy instantly appeared on Qinglong's face. After bowing to Chu Wuang, he eagerly transformed into a blue dragon and charged towards the great sage-level experts from the Heavenly God Academy below. Soon, he, or rather, the entire dragon, appeared in front of the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy. These two great sages from the Heavenly God Academy were already quite powerful. They have all reached the late stage of the Great Sage Realm. Now, they are facing two great sages from the Xinyuan family. Just as they were getting into a heated fight, the Azure Dragon appeared before them. Then, the Azure Dragon transformed back into human form. Its eyes filled with anger as it glared at the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy before it. "Today is the day you two die." Without hesitation, he summoned a long spear. He charged directly at the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying aura emanating from his body also erupted directly. Upon seeing this scene, the two great sages of the Heavenly God Academy instantly showed anger on their faces. "You're really courting death. Do you think following this prince of the Great Xia Empire will save your life? It will only make you die faster." At the same time, the voice of one of the great sages also came out, with a strong killing intent in his eyes. However, Qinglong ignored him at this moment. He quickly charged towards the direction of the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy. When the two great sages of the Xinyuan family saw this scene, they knew that it was arranged by His Highness Wu Shuang. So neither of them intended to interfere. Instead, they transformed into two beams of light and charged towards the other great saints of the Heavenly God Academy. After all, the Azure Dragon is a legendary mythical beast. If he can't fight two against one, then the two great sages of the Xinyuan family would look down on him. Therefore, the Azure Dragon is now directly facing off against two late-stage great sages from the Heavenly God Academy. Then Qinglong directly joined forces with two late-stage great sage experts from the Heavenly God Academy to engage in a fierce battle. "General D, how long do you think this great battle will last?" At this moment, Chu Wuang in the sky slowly looked at the masked man beside him and spoke, his eyes filled with a calmness. He seemed like a true general commanding an army. It shouldn't take long to break the formation. Once the formation is broken, the Heavenly God Academy will surely be defeated. According to my estimation, it will take at most 3 days to kill everyone from the Heavenly God Academy here. The masked General D beside him pondered Chu Wuang's words before looking intently at the battle below and speaking. "General, it must have been a long time since you've had a real battle. Why don't you go down and test the strength of these quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy?" After hearing General D's words, Chu Wuang spoke slowly to the general in front of him, with a calm expression on his face. He clearly felt that it would be very easy for the generals of the Great Xia Empire to defeat the Heavenly God Academy. "Your Highness must protect your safety, so I will not take action. Moreover, the current battle does not require my assistance." After hearing Chu Wuang's words, the masked man spoke to Chu Wuang with a serious expression. Although he also wanted to test the abilities of the quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy below, his more important goal now was to protect Chu Wuang. Chapter 790, the trump card of the Heavenly God Academy's prodigy. Chu Fan's human emperor Dharma form appears. After hearing the masked man's words, Chu Wuang felt somewhat helpless, but he could only nod in agreement. After all, he no longer has any other top experts protecting him, and, as a person in a superior position, he naturally knows that he cannot be in a dangerous place. Therefore, it's quite good that he has a powerful expert at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm protecting him. More importantly, the masked man beside him was protecting not only him, but also Chu Yenran. While Chu Wuang was talking to the masked man, the battle below intensified. For example, Even the quasi-emperor level beings from the Heavenly God Academy were somewhat unable to withstand the quasi-emperor level beings from the Great Xia Empire. After all, the quasi-emperors on the Great Xia Empire side are all outstanding figures in their respective worlds. Therefore, it is quite normal that these quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy could not withstand them. Moreover, many of the quasi-emperors on the Great Xia Empire side have reached the late-stage quasi-emperor realm and the perfect quasi-emperor realm. Therefore, their strength was naturally enough to directly overwhelm these quasi-emperors from the Heavenly God Academy in front of them. Take Chu Luchan, for example. Although he is constantly breaking the formation, the sword energy around him is also making the quasi-emperor level experts of the Heavenly God Academy around him feel troubled. This terrifying power far surpasses that of ordinary quasi-emperors. As for Xian Yuanpa and his group, they were now engaged in a fierce battle with the top talents of the Heavenly God Academy. Bai Hu's strength had already reached the Great Sage Perfection realm, so the Great Sage-level genius from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him naturally appeared quite insignificant. It could even be said that this Great Sage-level prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy was defeated by the White Tiger in just a few moves. The prodigy from the Heavenly God Academy glared angrily at the White Tiger before him. He was clearly furious at the White Tiger for easily defeating him, and then he quickly crushed the Jade Tablet in his hand. The next second, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from him. At the same time, a black figure slowly appeared behind him. Of course, the most important thing is the aura emanating from this black figure, which far exceeds the aura of an ordinary great emperor. However, at the same time that aura was released, the secret realm also began to unleash terrifying power. The terrifying power within the secret realm clearly intended to suppress the figure of this powerful being who had reached the level of an emperor. The two terrifying forces collided in midair in an instant. The White Tiger was completely dumbfounded when it saw this. He hadn't expected that the great sage of the Heavenly God Academy before him would be so easily fooled, summoning such a terrifying being after only a short battle. Without the slightest hesitation, he headed straight for the back. Because in Bai Hu's heart, only his own peerless prince could deal with the terrifying figure in front of him. Having thought of this, he naturally did not hesitate at all. The terrifying figure in the sky looked around at the laws that seemed to bind everything. Then he uttered a single word softly. Extinction. Then, a terrifying law directly pierced through the entire space. In an instant, the terrifying law within the great emperor's secret realm shattered completely. At the same time, the black figure appeared directly in front of everyone. When his gaze fell upon Chu Wuang, a murderous intent instantly flashed in his eyes. Die! Without hesitation, he then crushed down directly towards Chu Wuang. A terrifying hand descended directly from the sky. This power far exceeds what a typical quasi-emperor level expert could withstand. The middle-aged man wearing a mask in front of Chu Wuang was also shocked by what he saw. However, the middle-aged man did not hesitate at all at this moment. He gripped the long sword in his hand tightly. His eyes were filled with determination as he watched the enormous hand about to fall from the sky. General D, retreat. This is already the power of an emperor-level expert. You will not be able to withstand this attack now. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuang calmly looked at the middle-aged man wearing a mask in front of him and said, at the same time, without the slightest worry in his eyes, he looked up at the hand that was relentlessly crushing down towards him from the sky. It was as if the hand had never existed. Then, a pale golden light began to emanate from his body. Moreover, this pale golden light continued to gather behind him. Soon, a golden figure appeared behind him. The moment this golden figure appeared, the entire secret realm trembled violently once again. At the same time, the imposing aura emanating from this golden figure caused everyone present to prostrate themselves on the ground. Only now do they truly feel what the oppressive power of the Imperial Way means. The next second, the golden figure behind Chu Wuang instantly locked its gaze on the black figure in front of it. He also extended a giant golden hand. The terrifying force directly shattered the giant hand in the sky. At the same time, his eyes held a hint of disdain as he looked at the black figure in front of him. How dare the Heavenly God Academy attack my offspring? Does the Heavenly God Academy really intend to wage war against me and the entire Great Xia Empire? Then his majestic voice resounded throughout the entire secret realm. The next second, a golden spear instantly appeared in his hand. A terrifying golden light shot directly towards the black figure in front of them. The next second, a golden light pierced through the entire sky. Even the formation below couldn't withstand this golden spear. Then a terrifying force poured forth. It pierced right through the black figure in an instant. Impossible. You just broke through to the human emperor realm. So why have you reached the level of a second human emperor? The black-clad figure stared in disbelief at the human emperor's figure behind Chu Wuang. The disbelief in his eyes was immediately apparent. However, no matter how intense the incredible light in his eyes was, it couldn't change the fact that his body was slowly fading away. A terrifying power slowly spread from his body. At the same time, his black figure began to slowly dissipate into the world. It was as if none of it had ever happened. Everyone present looked up in shock at the sky. They hadn't anticipated this would happen. Chapter 791, Chu Fan's Domineering Strike, changes outside the secret realm. They never expected that this great battle would attract two such terrifying beings. More importantly, they just heard from this black figure that the master of this human emperor's Dharma image had reached the level of a second human emperor. Although they did not know exactly how powerful the second human emperor was, he was definitely beyond the realm of a human emperor. Otherwise, the black figure wouldn't have said that. After the black figure was destroyed, Chu Fan's human emperor avatar slowly glanced at Chu Wuang. But soon Chu Fan's human emperor avatar frowned and looked at the surrounding loss. The emperor in this secret realm is not as simple as you imagine. He is at least a 7th-generation emperor, so your father can't help you much. Everything from now on will have to be done by yourself. At the same time, Chu Fan's voice slowly reached Chu Wuang's ears, and as his voice reached Chu Wuang's ears, his golden figure slowly dissipated into the world. Because he could feel the pressure from this secret realm on him. If it were an ordinary great emperor's secret realm, he could break through it directly. However, Chu Fan could sense that the fallen emperor inside this secret realm was not as simple as he had imagined. More importantly, his human emperor Dharma image was originally summoned by Chu Wuang using the fortune of the Great Xia Empire, so his true strength is only at the level of a second emperor. Of course, his second emperor was different from other second emperors. Because he was originally at the human emperor level, he would not lose even if he fought against a powerhouse at the level of a 3-generation emperor. However, he couldn't unleash his true strength in this secret realm. Not to mention that the luck value consumed by his human emperor Dharma image was also terrifying. Therefore, he naturally did not intend to continue consuming his luck points and remain in the secret realm. After hearing his father's words, Chu Wuang understood, since he had felt from the beginning that this great emperor's secret realm was not simple. Then he cupped his hands in the direction his father had left. After doing all this, he slowly turned his gaze to the group of students from the Heavenly God Academy below. Because Chu Fan had just broken the Heavenly God Academy's formation, the 10 quasi-emperor level experts of the Great Xia Empire have now returned to their initial state. They no longer need to break the formation. After all, the formation had already been broken. The people present were all in shock. Especially the White Tiger, who had just been shocked by that black figure, was looking at Chu Wuang with disbelief in his eyes. "Your Highness, was that His Majesty the Human Emperor just now?" Then his voice trembled slightly as he asked Chu Wuang, his eyes filled with anticipation. After hearing Baihu's words, the others also looked at Chu Wuang with anticipation. After all, although they had heard the legend of the Human Emperor, very few of them had actually seen the real Human Emperor. Therefore, they're naturally very much looking forward to it. That's right, the one who just made the move was none other than my father, the Emperor. After hearing Baihu's words, Chu Wuang spoke with an air of arrogance, and then glanced at everyone present with a disdainful look. Finally, their gaze turned to the group from the Heavenly God Academy. Without the slightest hesitation, he issued the order directly to the Great Xia Empire. Anyone from the Heavenly God Academy present will be killed without mercy. Not a single one will be spared. His command was chilling. Clearly, he wanted to kill everyone present from the Heavenly God Academy. Upon hearing his voice, all the generals of the Great Xia Empire charged directly toward the Heavenly God Academy without the slightest hesitation. The Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion did not hesitate at all, and thus an epic battle began. Moreover, the Heavenly God Academy is no longer protected by any formations in this epic battle, so it is impossible for them to truly defeat the Great Xia Empire. While Chu Wuang was engaged in a fierce battle with the Great Sage and Quasi-Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, the group of top experts outside the secret realm naturally sensed what had just happened inside. However, at this moment, they did not know what had just happened in the secret realm. They could only sense two extremely powerful auras appearing in the secret realm. However, at this moment, Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu from the Great Xia Empire slowly stepped forward. It could be seen that both of them were looking towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of killing intent in their eyes. Because just now they could sense that one of the auras was their own emperor, and only their two princes could evoke the aura of their emperor, which meant that a top expert from the Heavenly God Academy had just made a move. That's why His Majesty the Emperor had to take action. Thinking of this, they were naturally furious. Of course, in addition to Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, The Great Perfection Holy Body and the Great Perfection Overlord Body also glared angrily at the several powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy. The Heavenly God Academy had clearly made preparations long ago, so at this time, there were quite a few Heavenly God Academy experts at the Great Emperor level outside the Great Emperor's secret realm. One of them even reached the level of a 3-generation emperor, clearly indicating that the true strength of the Heavenly God Academy has been unleashed. If I were to learn what grievances my highness suffered in the secret realm, then none of you would need to exist. Lu Bu then slowly walked forward, looked at the emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, and said, followed by a cold snort. After hearing Lu Bu's words, Zhao Zilong calmly nodded in the direction of Angel Academy. Even if they die in the secret realm, it is only a worthy death. What does it have to do with my Heavenly God Academy? The powerful figure from the Heavenly God Academy, who had been a 3-generation emperor, slowly stepped forward and spoke, his eyes revealing a hint of disdain and contempt. He clearly knew what would happen inside the Great Emperor's secret realm, so he naturally wouldn't indulge the Great Xia Empire now. Upon hearing the words of the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy, the Great Accomplished Holy Body instantly became enraged, wishing he could directly attack the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. However, just as he was about to make a move, a voice slowly echoed in his mind. Wu Shuang, it's all right. Now is not the time to make a move. Step down. Upon hearing that familiar voice, the Great Accomplished Holy Body immediately stopped in his tracks and respectfully bowed towards the direction of Chang'an City of the Great Xia Empire. He had just recognized the voice as belonging to someone else, and the only person he respected so much was Chu Fan of the Great Xia Empire. Chapter 792, Chu Fan's Fury. The true immortal heavenly horned ant of the Great Xia Empire heads to the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the Great Accomplished Holy Body simply let out a cold snort. With a calm look in his eyes, he continued to gaze towards the secret realm. As for the surrounding holy lands, they finally breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing this scene. If these two top experts were to actually fight, they would likely suffer an unprecedented blow. After all, their strength far surpasses that of ordinary emperor-level powerhouses. That's why they can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Meanwhile, inside the Time Tower in Chang'an City, the top experts of the Great Xia Empire continued to cultivate. At the very top of the Time Tower, a young man dressed in a golden robe was also cultivating. At the same time, he was surrounded by a terrifying golden light. If there were any top experts here, they would easily discover that the young man in the golden robe had reached the level of a 3-generation human emperor. But at that moment, the young man in the golden robe quickly opened his eyes and looked into the distance. At the same time, a hint of anger appeared on his handsome face. I didn't expect it to take so long to break through to the level of the 3rd human emperor. However, the Heavenly God Academy is really presumptuous, actually planning to leave all the people of my Great Xia Empire in the secret realm. It seems that I have to teach you a lesson. Then, the young man gazed into the distance and spoke, while at the same time, a terrifying power emanating from his body was also felt. The next second, the young man walked out of the Time Pagoda. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he went directly to where the Emperor and the others were. At this moment, the Emperor and the others naturally sensed this terrifying aura of the human Emperor, so they all opened their eyes. Then they quietly waited for the owner of this aura to arrive. Soon they saw the young man in the golden battle robe appear before them. We have met the Emperor. Then, without the slightest hesitation, the Emperor and the others cupped their hands in greeting to the young man in the golden battle robe and spoke. It was obvious that the young man in the golden battle robe was the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire, the human Emperor of this era, Chu Fan. At this moment, he waved to the Emperor and the others, and then walked directly to the center of the hall and sat down. Just now, the Great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy attacked Wu Shuang. Wu Shuang used his luck to summon my human Emperor Dharma image to destroy the Great Emperor's clone. However, the Heavenly God Academy did go too far this time. So, which of you will go to the Heavenly God Academy and let them know that my Great Xia Empire is not so simple? Chu Fan didn't hesitate at all and directly stated his purpose. After speaking, he looked towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. However, he quickly suppressed his killing intent because he knew that he was not yet able to deal with the Heavenly God Academy. However, the Heavenly God Academy cannot directly wage war against the Great Xia Empire because of this. After all, this is not only something that the Heavenly God Academy wants to see, but also something that the Great Xia Empire wants to see. Your Majesty, this humble general is going there. At this moment, a young man dressed in armor slowly walked out, looking at Chu Fan with a determined look in his eyes and said, the aura emanating from him had reached the level of a true immortal. This person was one of the 2 true immortal level experts that Chu Fan summoned during this period. At the same time, he is also a top genius in another world. He is also one of the 10 fiends, the heavenly horned ant. His strength is at the 7th level of true immortal, even surpassing that of the Emperor and Kuanping. Then you shall go. This is the aura of the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. Go and kill him directly. After hearing what the heavenly horned ant said, Chu Fan nodded to it and then sent a burst of energy towards it. This aura was the aura brought back by his human Emperor Dharma image, and it was also the aura of that great Emperor-level powerhouse from the Heavenly God Academy. After hearing Chu Fan's words, the Skyhorn ant nodded directly to him. Then, a terrifying aura instantly emanated from him. However, his restraint did not have any impact on the Great Xia Empire. Then, the horned ant flew straight into the sky and arrived above Chang'an City of the Great Xia Empire. Without the slightest hesitation, he headed straight towards the Heavenly God Academy. Perhaps they didn't know the location of the Heavenly God Academy at the beginning. However, they have indeed found the location of the Heavenly God Academy during this period. Therefore, the horned ants easily arrived outside the Heavenly God Academy. The Heavenly God Academy was originally located within a small world, which was created by a former true immortal-level powerhouse. The horned ant looked at the small world in front of it with a hint of mockery. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he threw a punch directly at the small world in front of him. The Heavenly Horned Ant's power was already among the top of the 10 fiends, so his punch directly tore apart the small world in front of him. This caused the entire small world of the Heavenly God Academy to shake. At the same time, an old man exuding a terrifying aura of death appeared instantly in front of the Skyhorn ant. The aura emanating from him had reached the level of an immortal. However, there is still a certain gap between him and the true immortal realm. This was a powerful being at the remnant immortal level from the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, the old man looked at the heavenly horned ant in front of him with a look of shock and disbelief. He obviously did not expect that there would be a true immortal level expert in this world. However, at this moment he was more puzzled because he did not expect that the true immortal in front of him would directly attack the Heavenly God Academy. Why did you directly attack my Heavenly God Academy? Do you think you're invincible just because you have reached the true immortal realm? If you do not give an explanation, my Heavenly God Academy will not hesitate to fight you to the death. This concerns the reputation of the Heavenly God Academy. So the elder from the Heavenly God Academy looked at the heavenly horned ant with a solemn expression and spoke. At the same time, you can feel the power within his body slowly beginning to recover. After the old man from the Heavenly God Academy finished speaking, he waited for the heavenly horned ant in front of him to reply. Of course, the old man from the Heavenly God Academy was not the only one waiting for the heavenly horned ant to reply. There are also the top experts in the Forbidden Zone and Xianyuan Wudao of the Xianyuan family, because they sensed the aura emanating from the heavenly horned ants when they launched their attack on the small world of the Heavenly God Academy, meaning they had been paying attention to the heavenly horned ants since that moment. Therefore, they were now eagerly awaiting the heavenly horned ant's reply. Chapter 793 Speculation about the Supreme Being within the Forbidden Zone and the various forces observing. Therefore, all the top experts are now looking in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy, because they also wanted to know what kind of great battle would take place between the Heavenly God Academy and this top expert. Meanwhile, the powerful figures within the Forbidden Zone, along with others, had naturally guessed the origin of this powerful individual emanating a terrifying aura. The only one who would dare to go to the Heavenly God Academy so openly is probably the Great Xia Empire, and currently, only the entire Great Xia Empire has such a top-tier expert. Why did the Great Xia Empire choose this time to attack the Heavenly God Academy, and even send a powerful figure who is suspected to be at the true immortal realm to attack the Heavenly God Academy? Did the Heavenly God Academy do something to anger the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire? A supreme-level expert in the Forbidden Zone slowly raised his head and looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy, while a hint of doubt could be seen in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that the Great Xia Empire would send a powerful figure, suspected to be at the true immortal realm, to the Heavenly God Academy. It should be noted that the time for the path to immortality is not far off, and even the Great Xia Empire would not dare to start a war with the Heavenly God Academy at this time. Otherwise, neither the Heavenly God Academy nor the Great Xia Empire will fare well, because the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy are also waiting for the path to immortality to open. The aura of an Emperor-level expert has been detected in the Emperor's secret realm this time. Perhaps something happened inside the secret realm that led the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire to take action against the Heavenly God Academy. Just after the Supreme Being finished speaking, an aged voice slowly echoed within the forbidden area. As the voice rang out, his gaze drifted leisurely toward the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. For these top-tier supreme beings within the Forbidden Zones, they could naturally sense the two terrifying auras emanating from the direction of the Great Emperor's secret realm. That's right. One of the auras should belong to the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire, while the other aura should belong to the Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy. So something must have happened in the Emperor's secret realm that caused the Heavenly God Academy and the Emperor of the Great Xia Empire to fight each other. Another top expert also spoke slowly at this moment. It could be felt that the power emanating from his body far exceeded that of an ordinary supreme being. Clearly, although he is the supreme being in the Forbidden Zone, his strength far surpasses that of an ordinary supreme being. It could even be said that his strength is constantly evolving towards a higher level. Although the Great Xia Empire sent a powerful expert who is suspected to be at the top level to attack the Heavenly God Academy, it is likely that the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire will not actually engage in a major war this time. After all, if the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy were to truly engage in a major war, the Great Xia Empire would definitely mobilize all its forces. Just then, a voice came from the depths of the Forbidden Zone, a voice that contained both calmness and a hint of surprise. He also explained that it was impossible for the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy to engage in a major war at this time. The main purpose of the Great Xia Empire sending this powerful figure, who is suspected to be at the level of a true immortal, to the Heavenly God Academy was probably to hold the Heavenly God Academy accountable. That way, they wouldn't lose face for their Great Xia Empire. More importantly, the fact that the Great Xia Empire sent a powerful figure who appeared to be at the true immortal realm could also intimidate the entire world. This includes the supreme being within their restricted area. The remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy clearly knew this, which is why he threatened the Heavenly Horned Ant in front of him. The supreme being within the Forbidden Zone understood after hearing the words of this top expert. However, instead of returning to their slumber, they decided to observe how the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy would handle the matter. After all, they also wanted to see if a major war would really break out between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire. Meanwhile, the top experts of the Xianyuan family all turned their attention to the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Xianyuan Wudao frowned as he looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Standing beside him were several other powerful figures from the Xianyuan family who had achieved enlightenment through unconventional means, their eyes filled with confusion and bewilderment. Ancestor, why did the Great Xia Empire choose this time to launch an attack on the Heavenly God Academy? Should our Xianyuan family help the Great Xia Empire launch an attack on the Heavenly God Academy? At this moment, one of the powerful members of the Xianyuan family, who had achieved enlightenment through unconventional means, slowly stepped forward and spoke, while a hint of worry could be seen in his eyes. After all, although they achieved a different kind of enlightenment, their strength was still a notch below that of a true emperor-level powerhouse. Moreover, they were preparing for their path to immortality, but they never expected that the Great Xia Empire would choose to attack the Heavenly God Academy at this time. It's fair to say that all of this caught them completely off guard. We don't need to support the Great Xia Empire, because this time the Great Xia Empire doesn't intend to really go to war with the Heavenly God Academy. Obviously, the Great Xia Empire just wants the Heavenly God Academy to give them an explanation, so we just need to watch the show. After hearing the words of this unconventional Dao-achieving expert from the Xianyuan family, Xianyuan Wudao waved his hand at him. At this moment, he naturally guessed the main reason why the Great Xia Empire was doing this. At the same time, his eyes held a hint of worry as he looked towards the direction of the Great Xia Empire. Clearly, Xianyuan Wudao was also pondering why the Great Xia Empire had chosen to do this. Of course, it wasn't just the Xianyuan family and the top experts in the Forbidden Zone who were watching the battle at this time. Even the Butian Pavilion and other top forces were all turning their attention to this side. At this moment, the experts of the Butian Pavilion had similar guesses to Xianyuan Wudao, so the Butian Pavilion did not choose to take action. Of course, if the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire really take action, then the Heaven-Mending Pavilion will naturally not choose to sit idly by. Therefore, many forces are now paying attention to the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy outside, the Heavenly God Academy, and the powerful figure, suspected to be a true immortal, sent by the Great Xia Empire. They also wanted to see how this great battle would ultimately turn out. Even the Temple Master of the War God Temple had curiosity in his eyes. After all, their young Temple Master had already begun to help the Great Xia Empire. All of this was in their imagination. Moreover, from the very beginning, they had the War God Temple's War Venerable help the Great Xia Empire, so that their War God Temple could establish a connection with the Great Xia Empire and perhaps enter the immortal realm after the path to immortality. Chapter 794, The Heavenly Horned Ant's Power Overwhelms the Heavenly God Academy. the choice of the remnant immortal of the Heavenly God Academy. Just as all forces were turning their attention to the outside of the Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, the Heavenly Horned Ant also looked at the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy in front of it with a hint of disdain in its eyes. It should be noted that his own strength had reached the late stage of true immortal, so this crippled immortal in front of him was naturally not taken seriously by him. I am here only to demand an explanation from the Heavenly God Academy to my Great Xia Empire. My Great Xia Empire will naturally not interfere in the competition between the younger generation of geniuses, but it is a bit excessive for your Heavenly God Academy to send an Emperor-level expert to interfere in the affairs between the geniuses of my Heavenly God Academy. At this moment, Tianzhao Ant slowly spoke to the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. In fact, if he could make a move, he would probably have already chosen to attack the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. Unfortunately, the Great Xia Empire has no intention of directly attacking the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, if the Heavenly God Academy were to hand over that Emperor-level being, Tianzhao would naturally not make a move. The remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy frowned upon hearing the words of the Heavenly Horned Ant. Clearly, he hadn't expected that an Emperor-level being from their Heavenly God Academy would make a move against a prodigy of the Great Xia Empire. Although from the very beginning they wanted to completely bury the princess and the peerless prince of the Great Xia Empire in the Emperor's secret realm. However, at that time, they did not consider asking a true Emperor-level powerhouse to take action, because they already had their own formations, and there were quite a few quasi-emperors who had entered the Great Emperor's secret realm. Therefore, they naturally believed that they could deal with the two princes of the Great Xia Empire. However, they did not expect that the Great Xia Empire would discover that their Heavenly God Academy had used a powerful expert at the level of an emperor. Of course, what this powerful immortal from the Heavenly God Academy didn't know was that there were also quite a few quasi-emperors in the Xia Empire, and many of them had already reached the late quasi-emperor stage or the perfect quasi-emperor stage. Therefore, they were naturally no match for the Great Xia Empire. So what if the Great Emperor of my Heavenly God Academy makes a move? Does your Great Xia Empire intend to fight my Heavenly God Academy to the death? After receiving a positive reply, the arrogant expression on the face of the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy disappeared. However, even so, he still looked at the Heavenly Horned Ant in front of him with a calm expression. After all, their Heavenly God Academy only had one powerful expert at the Great Emperor level make a move. So what could the Great Xia Empire do? After all, the Great Emperor-level being of their Heavenly God Academy has been staying in the Academy all this time. So even if this is a true immortal-level expert, it won't be as easy as one might imagine for him to take the Great Emperor of their Heavenly God Academy away. I have been ordered by the Emperor to take away this Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy. If the Heavenly God Academy dares to obstruct us, then my Great Xia Empire will directly take action against the Heavenly God Academy. After all, the safety of my Great Xia Empire's Prince Wuxuang and Princess Wuxuang far exceeds the Great Xia Empire's tolerance towards other forces. Now you only have two choices. Either hand over the Great Emperor-level being from your Heavenly God Academy, or choose to go to war with my Great Xia Empire. Upon hearing the words of the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy, the Heavenly Horned Ant looked at him with a mocking expression and said, after he finished speaking, the aura of a true immortal was released from his body in a terrifying way, making him seem like a war god standing between heaven and earth. The powerful cultivator at the remnant immortal level from the Heavenly God Academy was filled with shock upon sensing this terrifying power. Clearly, he hadn't expected the young man standing in front of him to be so incredibly powerful. However, at this moment, besides a hint of shock, his face was mostly gloomy. If the Heavenly God Academy were to go to war with the Great Xia Empire, it would not benefit the Heavenly God Academy at all. However, if the Heavenly God Academy does not intend to hand over this Emperor-level being, then he is currently unable to stop the man in front of him who exudes a terrifying aura. So now he is struggling internally, because he doesn't know whether or not to hand over the Emperor-level being in the Heavenly God Academy. However, if they were to hand over that Emperor-level figure from the Heavenly God Academy, how would the world view the Heavenly God Academy? Would the entire world think that the Great Xia Empire could bully the Heavenly God Academy? Of course, you can also bet that my Great Xia Empire won't dare to make a move. Seeing the gloomy face of the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy before him, the Heavenly Horned Ant spoke again to the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, you can see a hint of amusement in his eyes. After all, he already held an absolute advantage, so he naturally didn't need to worry about the top experts from the Heavenly God Academy taking action. Moreover, if the top experts from the Heavenly God Academy were to make a move, then the number of truly top experts in their Great Xia Empire would be quite considerable. Moreover, He alone could withstand several beings at the level of a remnant immortal. As soon as the heavenly horned ant finished speaking, everyone watching looked at the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of surprise in their eyes. At the same time, they also wanted to see whether the Heavenly God Academy would choose to confront the Great Xia Empire head-on or hand over that Emperor-level being. Even Chu Fan and his group from the Great Xia Empire gazed leisurely toward the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. At the same time, they looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy with a hint of mockery in their eyes. Clearly, at this point, they also wanted to see what the Heavenly God Academy would ultimately choose. Does Your Excellency think that my Heavenly God Academy is easy to bully? If so, then my Heavenly God Academy is willing to fight against the Great Xia Empire. After pondering for a moment, the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy looked at the heavenly horned ant in front of him without the slightest hesitation and spoke. In the end, he still did not choose to hand over the great emperor of their Heavenly God Academy. After all, if he handed over the great emperor of their Heavenly God Academy now, who else would be willing to help their Heavenly God Academy? After he finished speaking, he looked at the horned ant in front of him with a solemn expression. Upon hearing the words of the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy, the heavenly horned ant's smile deepened. He originally wanted to fight these remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy, but he thought he wouldn't have the chance. However, he didn't expect that the remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy would give him the opportunity. So, a smug smile spread across his face, and his eyes, without the slightest hesitation, fixed their gaze on the crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 795, The Terrifying Strength of the Heavenly Horned Ants. The remnant immortal of the Heavenly God Academy reappears. Then, the horned ant simply stood in front of it. At the same time, a terrifying aura emanated from him, accompanied by his terrifying voice. This is the final choice of your Heavenly God Academy. Since your Heavenly God Academy wants to fight against my Great Xia Empire, then let's bring this battle forward. As his majestic voice rang out, he didn't hesitate at all and threw a punch directly at the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him. The power of his punch far exceeded that of an ordinary true immortal. After all, the heavenly horned ant is the representative of power among the 10 fiends. Therefore, his punch carried pure power. The surrounding laws were utterly incapable of resisting his terrifying power. The crippled immortal from the Heavenly God Academy finally realized something was wrong, and a tattered longsword instantly appeared in his hand. However, one can sense that the aura emanating from this broken longsword far surpasses that of a great emperor or an extreme Dao imperial weapon. Clearly, this broken longsword is a legendary celestial artifact, but it is broken for some reason. Even so, its power far exceeds that of an ultimate imperial weapon. The horned ant's fist slammed directly into the longsword. Then, the terrifying power within his body struck the longsword in front of him, shattering it instantly. Even the power exceeding that of an ultimate imperial weapon could not withstand the attack of the heavenly horned ant. This is the strength of a heavenly horned ant that has reached the late stage of true immortal. Moreover, he was originally the representative of power among the 10 fiends. The terrifying force pierced through the long sword and landed on the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy. He was then sent flying back into the academy like a cannonball. His entire body crashed through the ground below like a meteor. At the same time, the small world of the Heavenly God Academy also trembled. This shows just how terrifying the true power of the Skyhorn Ant really is. After doing all this, the Heavenly Horned Ant looked calmly at the Heavenly God Academy below. Then he clenched his fist again. A golden light emanated directly from behind him. This is the indestructible scripture passed down by their Skyhorn Ant clan, its terrifying power directly penetrating the entire world. He carried this golden light and landed directly on the small world of the Heavenly God Academy. The terrifying force struck the Heavenly God Academy's formation directly. The next second, a crack appeared in the formation that could withstand the attack of a true immortal-level expert. The terrifying power instantly caused the entire small world of the Heavenly God Academy to tremble. This is the true power of the Skyhorn Ant. As the crack slowly widened, the top experts in the entire small world of the Heavenly God Academy all looked at the heavenly horned ants in the sky with a look of shock. At the same time, two old men slowly emerged from the depths of the Heavenly God Academy. They also carried a terrifying aura of death, but when they looked at the heavenly horned ants, their eyes held a hint of helplessness. I never expected that a true immortal would actually appear in this world. Although he is bound by the laws, the power he displays far exceeds that of an ordinary true immortal. It seems that his true strength should be around the late stage of true immortality. At this moment, an old man slowly looked at the horned ants in the sky and spoke, his eyes filled with a complex expression. Although the true immortal realm is divided into 9 levels, the first 3 levels are divided into the early stage, the middle 3 levels into the middle stage, and the last 3 levels into the late stage. Therefore, the current heavenly horned ant can indeed be considered a late-stage true immortal. Then, without hesitation, the 2 elders from the Heavenly God Academy appeared outside the Heavenly God Academy's small world, their eyes filled with a sense of helplessness as they looked at the heavenly horned ant. Oh, I didn't expect that there would be 3 remnant immortals in this Heavenly God Academy. I wonder if I can have a good fight this time. Upon seeing the 2 old men appear before him, the heavenly horned ant's face instantly lit up with excitement. He then spoke to the 2 old men. After speaking, he looked at the 2 old men in front of him with great anticipation. The 2 elders from the Heavenly God Academy were somewhat helpless after hearing what the heavenly horned ant said, since they were already at the level of a remnant immortal. Moreover, they had not fully released their aura at this time, because they wanted to wait for the path to immortality to open so they could deal with what would happen on the path. After all, the path to immortality is not as simple as one might imagine. Others may not know what lies within the path to immortality, but these top experts from Angel Academy naturally know. Therefore, when the 2 saw the Skyhorn ant in front of them, they did not intend to fight it head-on. I wonder what you intend to do to stop fighting with my Heavenly God Academy. After all, the true path to immortality is less than 100 years long, and I don't think the Great Xia Empire really wants to fight my Heavenly God Academy right now. Then one of the old men sighed and slowly walked up to the Skyhorn ant, speaking without any attempt to conceal his words, which were then heard throughout the entire world. Clearly, his words were not only meant to remind the heavenly horned ants that the path to immortality was about to begin, but also to remind the current human emperor of the Great Xia Empire. After all, once the path to immortality opens, both the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy must enter it. Therefore, they shouldn't be fighting a major war right now. After hearing the words of the old man from the Heavenly God Academy, the heavenly horned ant also showed a hint of hesitation on its face, because he also knew that his own emperor was worried about the path to immortality at this time. Otherwise, they would have already taken action against the Heavenly God Academy. After all, their Great Xia Empire currently possesses 3 true immortals and 1 mortal immortal, and among the 3 true immortals are 2 late-stage true immortals. Therefore, there is no problem for them to take action against the Heavenly God Academy now. However, they are currently gathering strength to deal with the forces that lie ahead on the path to immortality. It's simple to make our Great Xia Empire stop. Just hand over the Emperor from the Heavenly God Academy, who attacked our Great Xia Empire's peerless prince. At this moment, the heavenly horned ant slowly looked at the remnant immortal from the Heavenly God Academy in front of him and spoke. After speaking, he looked at the remnant immortal with a calm expression. Because if this remnant immortal doesn't intend to hand over the Great Emperor, then he will continue to attack. In any case, he can defeat the current Heavenly God Academy by himself, and even if he can't defeat it, he can still escape. Chapter 796. The Emperor leaves Chang'an City. A remnant immortal appears in a forbidden zone. As soon as the heavenly horned ant finished speaking, the 2 powerful cultivators at the remnant immortal level from the Heavenly God Academy who had just appeared in front of them instantly showed a gloomy expression. After all, they were powerful beings at the remnant immortal level from the Heavenly God Academy, and for tens of millions of years, no one had dared to speak to the Heavenly God Academy like that. Even the former Emperor Xin Yuan did not truly regard him. They simply sent someone from their Heavenly God Academy who had not yet reached the level of a remnant immortal to deal with him. If they had chosen to directly eliminate the Yellow Emperor at that time, then the Yellow Emperor would not have been able to appear outside this world, because at that time, the Yellow Emperor was only the 5th Emperor. However, they were quite helpless because they could clearly sense that the strength of the top expert from the Great Xia Empire in front of them had surpassed their own. In other words, if the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire were to go to war now, even the 3 remnant immortal level experts from the Heavenly God Academy would not be able to defeat the top expert from the Great Xia Empire in front of them. More importantly, the path to immortality will open in 100 years, so the Heavenly God Academy will naturally not miss this opportunity. However, if they were to choose to hand over that Emperor-level being, how would the entire world view their Heavenly God Academy? Although an Emperor-level being is nothing special within their Heavenly God Academy, if they were to hand over such a figure, the entire world would believe that their Heavenly God Academy is no match for the Great Xia Empire. This is why the 2 remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy still have a hesitant expression on their faces. At this time, they were also considering whether or not to engage in a final battle with the Great Xia Empire. Of course, at this moment, besides the contemplation of the Heavenly God Academy, the top experts in the Forbidden Zones and the top forces in this world also turned their attention to the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Clearly, at this point, they also wanted to see what the Heavenly God Academy thought and made its choice. Of course, the top experts in these Forbidden Zones naturally hope that the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire will go to war, because they can gain some benefits from it. After all, if the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire go to war, then these top experts in the Forbidden Zones can sit back and watch the great battle. Then they can reap the benefits without lifting a finger. As for Xianyuan Wudao, he was seriously considering whether the Heavenly God Academy would agree to the Great Xia Empire's request. If it did not, then no matter how weak their Xianyuan family was, they would have no choice but to help the Great Xia Empire. After all, the Xianyuan family has no other choice now. Of course, it wasn't just the Xianyuan family that had this idea. Even the current Butian Pavilion shared the same sentiment. Meanwhile, Chu Fan, who witnessed this scene from the Great Xia Empire, frowned, because he did not expect that the Heavenly Horned Ant's trip to the Great Heavenly God Academy would directly attract 3 beings at the level of a remnant immortal. Although it would be very easy for him to deal with these 3 crippled immortals, judging from the current situation, the Heavenly God Academy probably won't hand over that Great Emperor. Since so many remnant immortals have already appeared at the Heavenly God Academy, they naturally cannot choose to hand over that Great Emperor directly. It seems that the Great Xia Empire's intimidation of the Heavenly God Academy is not enough. In that case, Your Majesty, you should go again. I want to see if the Heavenly God Academy will make the same choice after seeing that the Great Xia Empire has 2 true immortal-level experts. A hint of disdain quickly appeared on Chu Fan's lips, and then he spoke directly to the Emperor beside him. After he finished speaking, a hint of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Although he doesn't want to directly attack the Heavenly God Academy right now, if another true immortal-level being appears on the Great Xia Empire's side, and the Heavenly God Academy chooses to protect that Emperor-level being, then the Great Xia Empire wouldn't mind going to war. Moreover, although the Emperor's strength was only at the first level of the mortal-immortal realm, it would still be very easy for him to deal with a few minor remnant immortals. Moreover, there was also the late-stage true immortal Tianjie outside the Heavenly God Academy at this time. Your subordinate understands. Upon hearing Chu Fan's words, the Emperor's face instantly lit up with excitement, and then a terrifying aura emanated from him. This caused the entire city of Chang'an to tremble. The next second, the Emperor transformed into a beam of light and headed towards the Heavenly God Academy. Meanwhile, Chu Fan, who was in Chang'an City, saw this scene and curled his lips. He didn't expect this guy to cause such a commotion when he left Chang'an City. However, Chu Fan did not blame him at this time, because Chu Fan also knew that the current emperor intended to let the whole world see the true strength of their Great Xia Empire. At the same time, that terrifying aura emanated from Chang'an City of the Great Xia Empire. All the powerful figures in the world felt this terrifying aura. The top experts in those forbidden zones also instantly turned their gazes toward the emperor, because they could sense that the strength of the owner of this aura had far exceeded the level of a remnant immortal. A true immortal realm being. No, this one should be called a legendary red dust immortal realm being. I never expected that the Great Xia Empire would have a red dust immortal realm expert. It seems that we underestimated the Great Xia Empire after all. A cry of surprise came from within the restricted area, and then an old man exuding a terrifying aura appeared in the sky above the restricted area. The aura emanating from him had reached the level of a remnant immortal, clearly indicating that he was a powerful remnant immortal within the Forbidden Zone. When he sensed the aura emanating from the Heavenly Horned Ant, he wasn't particularly shocked, because at that time he guessed that this true immortal-level expert from the Great Xia Empire must have come from the immortal realm. That makes sense. However, even in the immortal realm, there are no experts at the mortal-immortal level, because no one would choose to break through to the mortal-immortal realm, since that would require 9 transformations, which is not something an ordinary person can accept. Even a truly gifted genius like that could not possibly succeed in transforming, because none of the people this crippled immortal knew had successfully undergone transformation. I never expected that a mortal immortal would appear in this world. It seems that the Great Xia Empire is far more complex than it appears. I wonder what choice the Heavenly God Academy will make this time. Just as the old man finished speaking, another powerful figure from the Forbidden Zone at the level of a remnant immortal appeared beside him. He also looked incredulously in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy and spoke. Chapter 797. The Emperor arrives at the Heavenly God Academy, and the Heavenly God Academy compromises. Clearly, he hadn't expected that the legendary immortal of the mortal world was actually real. It should be noted that this level was only calculated by those truly top-tier experts. Throughout history, no one has ever truly become a powerful being at the level of a mortal immortal. Unexpectedly, a mortal immortal has appeared in the Great Xia Empire, which naturally makes the remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone feel incredulous. Although it is indeed surprising that a powerhouse at the mortal immortal realm is here, this world should have a strong suppression of true immortals and powerhouses at the mortal immortal realm. So now we have to see what choice the Heavenly God Academy makes. At this moment, several more powerful beings at the level of remnant immortals appeared beside the two remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone. One of them looked in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy and sighed softly. However, a hint of schadenfreude could be seen in his eyes. Clearly, he was also quite puzzled by the top experts of the Great Xia Empire. However, what he wanted to know more about at this moment was the choice of the Heavenly God Academy. He wanted to see if the Heavenly God Academy would choose to hand over this emperor. If the Heavenly God Academy does not choose to hand over this great emperor, then what awaits the Heavenly God Academy is probably an attack from two true immortal level beings. Moreover, one of them was a powerful expert at the mortal immortal realm who had never appeared before. The other remnant immortals nodded after hearing his words, and then their gazes all turned towards the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Of course, it wasn't just the powerful figures in the Forbidden Zone who were shocked at this moment. Xian Yuan Wu Dao, from the Xian Yuan family, was also looking incredulously in the direction where the emperor had left, although he could not sense the emperor's true cultivation level. However, he was very clear that the strength of this powerful figure who came from the Great Xia Empire had definitely reached the true immortal realm. This moment made him feel incredible, because he hadn't expected that there would be a true immortal level being in the Great Xia Empire. After all, the appearance of a true immortal was already unbelievable to him, not to mention that they are two beings at the level of true immortals. Then, when he looked at the Heavenly God Academy, there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. After all, it seems that even if the Heavenly God Academy doesn't intend to hand over that emperor, there's nothing they can do. They still couldn't contend with two true immortal level experts. At this moment, the emperor had already appeared outside the Heavenly God Academy, looking at the few remaining immortals of the Heavenly God Academy with a calm expression. Then he nodded to the horned ant beside him. Only then did he slowly look at the three powerful immortals from the Heavenly God Academy and speak. The emperor only wants a result. If the Heavenly God Academy does not choose to hand over this emperor, then I will have no choice but to take action myself. However, I think the Heavenly God Academy cannot bear such a result at present. Without the slightest hesitation, the emperor addressed the three remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy. After speaking, he looked at them with a playful expression. At this moment, the shock in the eyes of the three remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy slowly faded. Instead, he wore an angry expression. When they first sensed the terrifying aura emanating from the emperor's body, they immediately guessed that the emperor was in the mortal immortal realm. Their eyes were filled with disbelief at that moment. However, they became even more furious after hearing the emperor's words, because they also knew that what the emperor said was true, but this was too much of a disrespect to their Heavenly God Academy. You might think that in this world, beings at the true immortal level would be suppressed. Perhaps this is a misunderstanding of my Great Xia Empire by your Heavenly God Academy. Beings at the true immortal level are indeed suppressed, but I became an immortal in the mortal world. So do you think I will be suppressed by this world? Seeing that the three remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy remained silent, the emperor continued to speak. After he finished speaking, the terrifying power of the mortal world emanating from his body erupted. One could even sense that the aura of immortality emanating from him far surpassed that of ordinary true immortal level experts. Then he calmly gazed at the three remnants of the Heavenly God Academy before him. After hearing the emperor's words, the three remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy began to ponder, and at the same time, they naturally sensed the terrifying aura emanating from the emperor. They understood that even if the three of them went all out, they couldn't stop the emperor in front of them, let alone the true immortal level being beside him. Alas, this time it was the fault of my Heavenly God Academy. You, Great Xia Empire, may take the person away. However, I hope that the Taoist of Great Xia Empire will act accordingly. After all, my Heavenly God Academy is not to be trifled with. Just as the three remnant immortals of the Heavenly God Academy were still pondering, a very old voice came from inside the academy, and this old voice was also mixed with a very strong aura. It was as if the whole world revolved around him. As the aged voice ended, a beam of light appeared before the emperor. The owner of this light was an emperor-level being. His strength had reached the level of a second emperor, but at this moment, his face was completely bloodless. He is now even filled with despair. He knew that the patriarch of their Heavenly God Academy had abandoned him, but he did not blame the Heavenly God Academy, because he knew that he had brought all of this upon himself. Moreover, if their ancestor doesn't give up on him, then the entire Heavenly God Academy will have to face these two top experts. Thus, this powerful Emperor-level figure instantly looked at the Emperor and the heavenly horned ant in front of him with a hint of anger on his face, because he knew that all of this was caused by these two people from the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, he naturally directs his anger at the two of them. Upon seeing this, the Emperor let out a cold snort without the slightest hesitation. The terrifying power instantly obliterated the great Emperor of the Heavenly God Academy before him, and after doing so, he threw the great Emperor's remains away. His eyes were very calm. Then he leisurely turned his gaze to the myriad realms of the heavens. At this moment, he could naturally feel the gazes of the world's top beings upon them. This is the consequence of attacking His Highness of the Great Xia Empire. If anyone still thinks of attacking His Highness of the Great Xia Empire, then this will be their consequence. At this moment, the Emperor addressed the Heavenly God Academy directly, his eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. After speaking, the Emperor's eyes returned to calm, and he glanced directly in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the Heavenly God Academy. Chapter 798, The Calculations of the Remnant Immortal in the Forbidden Zone were all waiting for the right opportunity, the path to immortality. Upon witnessing this scene, the heavenly horned ant calmly glanced in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. Then he was seen stepping into the void. A terrifying aura emanated from him. The next second, this terrifying aura directly struck the formation of the Heavenly God Academy. This instantly shook the Heavenly God Academy to its core. After doing all this, he simply turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Clearly, he was just warning the Heavenly God Academy. The three remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy were also furious upon witnessing this scene. He hadn't expected that this true immortal of the Great Xia Empire would be so dissatisfied with their Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, they even dared to attack the formation of their Heavenly God Academy when they left. Even so, they are powerless against this top expert of the Great Xia Empire, because the true top expert of their Heavenly God Academy has allowed this to happen. This means that the great war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy has come to a complete end. After the matter at the Heavenly God Academy came to a close, all the top powers withdrew their attention. At this moment, the few powerful beings at the remnant immortal level above the Forbidden Zone were also gazing wistfully in the direction of the Heavenly God Academy. I didn't expect that a fight would not break out in the end. It seems that this old guy from the Heavenly God Academy is really cunning, but he must be thinking about his path to immortality 100 years from now. Otherwise, given his temper, he would never have been able to resolve this great war with the Great Xia Empire so easily. At this moment, a player with low health in the restricted area slowly spoke, and his eyes showed a calmness, indicating that he had already guessed this outcome from the beginning. However, when the result actually arrived, he still had a look of disappointment on his face. After all, he also hoped that the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy would really fight. This way, they will have far fewer opponents on their path to immortality. After all, not everyone who enters the path to immortality can become a true immortal. You should know that they had been waiting for Chun Xinglu for who knows how long. Therefore, they naturally hoped that the Heavenly God Academy could fight against the Great Xia Empire. After all, those in the Forbidden Zone knew about the mysteries of the Heavenly God Academy, so they naturally hoped that the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire would both suffer heavy losses when they went in. Although the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire did not fight this time, the Great Xia Empire's provocation against the Heavenly God Academy will lead to an earlier conflict between them on the path to immortality 100 years from now. At that time, we can still reap the benefits. Meanwhile, another remnant immortal in the Forbidden Area waved his hand dismissively and said, although the remnant immortals of the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy did not actually engage in a major battle this time. However, this time the feud between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire is completely irreconcilable. Therefore, once they enter the path to immortality, they will definitely engage in a fierce battle immediately. At that time, the remnant immortals in their Forbidden Zone can still reap the benefits. The others nodded silently after hearing what the crippled immortal said. For these ancient monsters who have lived for countless years, they can naturally understand this scene. At the same time, they also understood that the great war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy was not over. It was just that the war would be postponed. It can be said that they are all very clear that the great war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy has only been postponed. Therefore, they are now even more looking forward to the great war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy on the path to immortality. In this way, they can reap the benefits while on the path to immortality. Having figured this out, they returned to the Forbidden Zone to slumber. After all, although the Forbidden Zone contained substances that could prolong life, it could not change their lifespan within this realm. At most, it can only increase their lifespan, but the more lifespan they gain, the more lifespan they want. This is why the top experts and supreme beings in the Forbidden Zone have never chosen to leave. Those weaker supreme beings couldn't even obtain the substance for immortality, which is why they chose to launch the Dark Turmoil. Because absorbing the lifespan of the beings in this world can extend their own lifespan. So they directly launched the Dark Rebellion. But even if they harvest the life force of the creatures in this world, they can only increase their lifespan by a little bit. Therefore, to achieve true immortality, one still needs immortality substances. However, the matter of immortality is not as simple as it seems, because immortality does not mean immortality. Otherwise, why wouldn't the Heavenly God Academy, which possesses the substance of immortality, and these top experts in the Forbidden Zones be active in the world? The main reason is that while longevity substances can grant people a longer lifespan, they also have drawbacks. For example, these top experts in the Forbidden Zone need to sleep to maintain their immortality. The situation at the Heavenly God Academy was similar. As the supreme beings within these Forbidden Zones returned to their slumber, Xianyuan Wudao of the Xianyuan family naturally noticed this scene. At this moment, he looked in the direction of the Great Xia Empire and sighed. He then returned to the Xianyuan family to cultivate in seclusion, as he wanted to quickly improve his strength. Only in this way can he cope with the path to immortality that lies ahead. Of course, with this war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy, there was no real battle this time. All the powers now knew the true terror of the Great Xia Empire, because they witnessed the overwhelming power of the Great Xia Empire over the Heavenly God Academy, a situation that rarely occurs. It could even be said that they had always been speculating about the relative strength of the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy, but after this incident, they had a new perspective, because they believed that the strength of the Great Xia Empire should surpass that of the Heavenly God Academy. Otherwise, the Great Xia Empire would not have been able to so easily intimidate the Heavenly God Academy. After all, this time the Heavenly God Academy chose to back down. This demonstrates just how terrifying the strength of the Great Xia Empire truly was. More importantly, the number of true immortal level beings appearing in the Great Xia Empire this time has reached 2. Although they didn't know the true immortal realm, they knew that the strength of the experts sent by the Great Xia Empire this time had surpassed that of the Great Emperor. They might be those legendary immortal level powerhouses. Therefore, the top experts in this world are now even more wary of the Great Xia Empire. At the same time, many people are speculating about just how powerful the Great Xia Empire really is. Chapter 799, The Human Race's Ancient Starry Road, The Secret Realm War ends. Of course, the two peerless powerhouses who appeared in the Great Xia Empire this time completely shocked all the powerful beings in this universe. This time, the two top experts from the Great Xia Empire directly overwhelmed the entire Heavenly God Academy. It's important to know that the Heavenly God Academy is now considered one of the 3 top powers on this continent. He was even considered the top-tier power among these 3 major forces. Of course, this excludes the top experts within the restricted area and the restricted area itself. After all, everyone believes that the restricted area has always been the top, even surpassing the 3 top forces. This time, the actions of the Great Xia Empire have completely solidified its strength, and everyone now believes that the Great Xia Empire is the most powerful of the 3 major forces. While the entire world was still in shock at the strength of the Great Xia Empire, at this time, the Heavenly Horned Ant and the Emperor returned to the Great Xia Empire once again. Upon returning to the Great Xia Empire, they did not reappear in the public eye, but instead went back to cultivate in seclusion. After all, everyone is waiting for the path to immortality 100 years from now. So even those who have reached the level of true immortals need to constantly improve their strength. Even Chu Fan had to go back to seclusion to cultivate again, because he really wanted to break through to the true immortal realm before the path to immortality opened. Of course, breaking through to the true immortal realm after breaking through to the human emperor realm was not as simple as he imagined. More importantly, he wanted to test whether he could break through to the realm of the mortal immortal. Although the mortal immortal realm is only 1 level stronger than the true immortal realm, Chu Fan knows that it is much easier for someone in the mortal immortal realm to break through to a higher realm. This is also why most of the powerful beings in that world chose to break through to the mortal immortal realm. Therefore, he wanted to see if he was qualified to break through to the mortal immortal realm. If he successfully broke through to the mortal immortal realm, he might have a better chance to break through to a higher realm in the future. And then the Great Xia Empire stopped making any moves. All eyes that had been focused on the Great Xia Empire were now focused elsewhere. At this moment, they were even more looking forward to the emergence of the prodigies from the secret realm. They also wanted to see which of the geniuses in the secret realm had obtained the Emperor's inheritance. In addition, many top experts are also waiting for the path to immortality to begin. After all, the opening of the path to immortality is not just a simple matter of becoming an immortal. Because before the path to immortality opens, there is the ancient Starry Sky path. After the arrival of the Starry Sky Ancient Road, their world will be connected to other worlds. At that time, the top experts in their world will be able to clash with the top experts in other worlds. Unfortunately, only the most outstanding young talents can set foot on the Ancient Star Road. More importantly, the Ancient Starry Road contains resources that can help the younger generation of geniuses become powerful emperors. That's why these sacred sites are so highly anticipated. Of course, Chu Fan knew about the Ancient Starry Sky Road. Moreover, he has now reached the realm of the human emperor. Therefore, even if he doesn't want to step onto the Ancient Starry Road, he can simply choose not to enter it. However, if he wants to set foot on the Ancient Starry Road, he can certainly do so, because his age is still within the limits of the Starry Sky Ancient Road. Therefore, it is entirely possible for him to set foot on the Ancient Starry Road. Moreover, Chu Fan also wanted to see the ancient city of the human race at the end of the Starry Sky Ancient Road, because many of the human race's top emperor-level powerhouses left their names there. Of course, those emperors who left their names were not yet truly emperor-level powerhouses when they left their names. It can be said that Chu Fan is an exception. Even the former Emperor Xian Yuan did not successfully break through to the Emperor realm during his time. That Xian Yuan Emperor was a powerful figure who reached the Emperor realm on the Ancient Star Road. Therefore, Chu Fan's actions naturally shocked many people. Many people were surprised to learn that Chu Fan's talent was so terrifying. And at the same time, the universe was in a state of peace. The great battle inside the secret realm was almost over. After all, the great battle in the secret realm had been going on for several days. If it weren't for the large number of quasi-emperors at the Heavenly God Academy, they would have already been slaughtered by the Great Xia Empire. However, they have now been almost entirely slaughtered by the Great Xia Empire. After all, the quasi-emperors on the Great Xia Empire side are all invincible in their respective realms. Moreover, there are so many of them who are at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. As you can see, there are corpses scattered in front of the emperor's tomb. One after another, the geniuses and quasi-emperors of the Heavenly God Academy perished here. Now only a few powerful individuals at the late quasi-emperor stage remain to continue supporting the cause. However, it is impossible for them to withstand the attack of the Great Xia Empire at present. After all, the Great Xia Empire still has so many beings at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm. As time goes by little, soon, everyone from the Heavenly God Academy perished in this secret realm. Of course, those hidden geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy did not perish. Although this time, the Heavenly God Academy summoned most of its powerful members who had entered the secret realm to the front of the Emperor's tomb. However, some of the powerful figures and geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy did not have time to come to the Emperor's tomb. Therefore, naturally, many of the geniuses from the Heavenly God Academy did not perish in the secret realm. However, their numbers are not particularly large. After everyone from the Heavenly God Academy perished in front of the Emperor's tomb, Chu Wuang then leisurely glanced at everyone present. Everyone present had excited expressions in their eyes. Of course, those with excited expressions were the powerful figures from the Great Xia Empire and the Xian Yuan family. Meanwhile, the forces that were helping the Great Xia Empire were also very excited. After all, from the moment they helped the Great Xia Empire, they had already boarded the Great Xia Empire's warship. In other words, they did not fail this time. Fortunately, this time the final outcome was that the Great Xia Empire and the Xian Yuan family joined forces and won. And with the fall of everyone at the Heavenly God Academy, Yang Qilang went directly to the body of one of the prodigies from the Heavenly God Academy. Without hesitation, he took out the Azure Dragon Jade Pendant. After all, to enter the Great Emperor's secret realm in front of them, one would naturally need the 4 Jade Pendants. Now, their Great Xia Empire already possesses 3 Great Jade Pendants. In other words, after obtaining this Azure Dragon Jade Pendant, they can gather all the Jade Pendants. Yang Qilang then directly presented the Azure Dragon Jade Pendant to Chu Wuang. Chapter 800 The Emperor's Tomb opens. Wasteland under the setting sun. Chu Wuang looked at the Azure Dragon Jade Pendant in front of her and nodded to Yang Qilang. Then he took out 2 more Jade Pendants from his pocket. These 2 Jade Pendants are the White Tiger Jade Pendant and the Phoenix Jade Pendant, which he acquired some time ago. Now they have a total of 3 Jade Pendants. At this moment, Chu Yenran naturally noticed this as well. So, without any hesitation, she took out the last Xuanwu Jade Pendant. As the 4 jade pendants floated in the air, a terrifying force began to swirl around them. Then, the 4 jade pendants transformed into 4 beams of light of different colors and headed directly toward the Emperor's tomb. The next second, the 4 beams of light appeared directly on the gate of the Emperor's tomb. Then, a crack appeared in the palace of the Emperor's tomb. The next second, an ancient aura emanated directly from the Emperor's tomb. At the same time, the palace gates of the Emperor's mausoleum slowly opened. Everyone who witnessed this scene looked on with anticipation. As the gates of the Emperor's tomb opened, a very ancient yet fierce aura emanated from it. Everyone felt an extremely terrifying pressure. Even the powerful quasi-emperors of the Great Xia Empire at this moment felt this pressure, but they frowned as they looked at the great Emperor's tomb in front of them. Chu Wuang took a step forward without the slightest hesitation. Then, a golden light instantly enveloped him, and without hesitation, he headed straight for the palace of the great Emperor's tomb. Seeing this, the others from the Great Xia Empire followed their peerless prince without hesitation. Chu Yenran and the others then naturally stepped directly into the palace of the Emperor's mausoleum. After the people of the Great Xia Empire entered the palace of this imperial mausoleum, the people of the Xianyuan family and the Butian Pavilion followed the people of the Great Xia Empire into the palace without any hesitation. After these 3 forces entered the Emperor's tomb, the War God Temple and other forces behind them did not hesitate at all. After all, they originally helped the Great Xia Empire, so now they could be considered to have a good relationship with the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, they followed the footsteps of the Great Xia Empire and entered the Emperor's mausoleum without the slightest hesitation. Just as these forces were heading towards the Emperor's tomb, at this moment, the prodigies and powerful figures who were watching the battle also appeared one after another. At this time, you could see that their eyes still contained a hint of shock and fear. Clearly, they hadn't expected this great battle to end this way. They never imagined this great battle would end this way from the very beginning. I never expected that so many powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy would perish here. It seems that a great war between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy is inevitable this time. At this moment, a veteran prodigy at the Great Sage level stepped forward and slowly spoke. Perhaps he was no longer considered a prodigy, and a hint of shock could be seen in his eyes. Because after this great Emperor's secret realm ends, the relationship between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire will definitely not end so easily. In any case, this time the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire have formed a complete feud. Perhaps after this secret realm ends, it will be the time for the 2 top powers to go to war. That being said, there are more and more forces supporting the Great Xia Empire now, and we don't know how to choose. Although the number of forces supporting the Great Xia Empire is increasing, there should still be a gap between the Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. After all, the Heavenly God Academy has existed for so long, while the Great Xia Empire has only just appeared in the world. Whether or not a great war breaks out between them is no longer of much concern to us. Now we should see if we can obtain the Emperor's legacy. That's right. We came here for the Emperor's legacy, so now we need to see if we can obtain it. Charge! Many of the geniuses present were considering whether a major war would break out between the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire, since the number of quasi-emperors and great saints who had fallen from the Heavenly God Academy this time far exceeded their expectations. However, after only a short while, they turned their gaze back to the great Emperor's tomb in front of them, since the Heavenly God Academy and the Great Xia Empire would not go to war now, regardless of whether it was possible. They might as well go directly into the Emperor's tomb to seek the Emperor's legacy. If they could obtain the Emperor's legacy, their strength would increase rapidly. They might even become powerful emperors. Therefore, many people are now looking at the Imperial tomb in front of them with great excitement. Meanwhile, some of the more ambitious geniuses couldn't resist and went directly into the Emperor's tomb. The other geniuses, seeing this, naturally didn't hesitate at all. They all headed towards the Emperor's tomb. Just as all the prodigies were making their way toward the Emperor's tomb, Chu Wuang arrived at a mysterious space on the other side. Immediately after entering the Emperor's secret realm, he was separated from the powerful figures of the Great Xia Empire who were with him, and was then directly transported to a mysterious space. Chu Wuang frowned as he sensed the terrifying killing intent around him, but at this moment he slowly headed towards the light ahead. Soon, he found himself in a wasteland. There were many bloodstains on this wasteland, making it look like an abandoned battlefield. At the same time, he instantly sensed that the killing intent he had just felt was emanating from this wasteland. More importantly, there was a setting sun in this wasteland, making it look extremely desolate. Where exactly is this place? Could it be the battlefield where this great emperor fell? But why can't I sense the aura of a great emperor-level expert, or the aura of a great emperor-level expert who once existed? Chu Wuang's golden eyes were constantly scanning the surrounding environment, but soon a look of doubt appeared on his face, because he now realizes that this wasteland is just a wasteland with no use whatsoever. Even when he used his own luck to scan the environment, he couldn't find the aura of a powerful being at the Great Emperor level. They couldn't even find the aura of a powerhouse at the Great Emperor level or above. It was as if this wasteland did not exist in this world. Thinking of this, Chu Wuang's eyes also showed a strong sense of surprise. Chapter 801, The Unknown Space-Time. The source of the fall of the four divine beasts. Of course, if this wasteland didn't exist in this world, then Chu Wuang wouldn't be here. Therefore, Chu Wuang is still constantly using the fortune of the Great Xia Empire to find the differences in this wasteland. The golden light in his eyes was constantly scanning the surrounding environment. Soon, huge changes began to occur in the sky. For beams of light, each different in appearance, fell from the sky. The next second, the four beams of light transformed into the forms of four divine beasts and appeared in front of Chu Wuang. More importantly, these four divine beasts seemed completely unaware of Chu Wuang in front of them. Although Chu Wuang was very puzzled by what he saw, he still looked at his surroundings with a calm expression. At the same time, he took a step forward without any hesitation. As he took a step forward, the four divine beasts in front of him began to change their forms. Then, 3 men and 1 woman appeared in the sky. 3 young men and a stunningly beautiful woman. They all stared ahead with solemn expressions on their faces. It was as if something big was about to happen. As the 4 divine beasts transformed into human form, Chu Wuang suddenly fell to darkness before her eyes. The next second, he appeared directly above this wasteland. At the same time, this wasteland no longer looked like it did at the beginning. Instead, it resembled a luxurious city, or rather, a luxurious kingdom. However, at this moment, a terrifying aura was continuously emanating from ahead. After sensing these terrifying auras, Chu Wuang instantly understood their origin. His golden eyes were constantly swirling with golden light, as if trying to see through the black aura. Could this be the aura of those supreme beings in the Forbidden Zone? It's a pity we've never actually seen the aura of those supreme beings in the Forbidden Zone, otherwise I should be able to recognize it now. Then Chu Wuang frowned and said, his eyes showing a hint of worry, because he had already learned some legends about the master of this great emperor's secret realm from the 4 divine beasts. Therefore, he now guesses that these dark auras are the dark sovereigns in the Forbidden Zone, but this is just his guess. Although the Great Xia Empire did indeed fight a great battle with the supreme being in the Forbidden Zone, he was still young at the time and naturally did not know about these things. Therefore, he naturally didn't know much about the aura emanating from the supreme being within the Forbidden Zone. However, he was quite surprised to see the scene in front of him. As these dark auras continued to converge, a terrifying aura appeared in the sky the next second. Then several dark figures appeared in this space. The aura emanating from these dark figures had reached an extremely terrifying level. This being far surpasses the average quasi-emperor at the peak of their realm. It seems to be a supreme-level powerhouse. If it is a supreme-level being, then it must be a supreme within the dark Forbidden Zone. But why am I here in this unknown space-time? Chu Wuang was now certain of his guess, but he still looked up at the sky with a puzzled expression, clearly not understanding why he had appeared in this unknown space-time. However, he quickly turned his gaze forward again. Since he had appeared in this unknown space-time, the owner of this secret realm must want to tell him something through this unknown space-time. Thinking of this, he continued reading without the slightest hesitation. As these powerful figures, each exuding an aura of supreme authority, appeared in the sky, the 4 divine beasts reappeared there. The aura emanating from the 4 divine beasts was extremely terrifying. Each of them had reached the perfect quasi-emperor realm, or rather, they had already stepped halfway into the great emperor realm. Therefore, their strength is not particularly weak now. Then, the 4 divine beasts turned their gazes to the 3 supreme beings in the dark Forbidden Zone in front of them, and without any hesitation, they launched an attack on the 3 supreme beings in the dark Forbidden Zone. Then a real battle broke out in the sky. Although Chu Wuang had already experienced the battles between true emperor-level powerhouses, he still felt a sense of respect as he watched the battle between the 4 divine beasts in front of him and the supreme being in the dark Forbidden Zone. After all, the 4 divine beasts are now battling the supreme beings within the dark Forbidden Zone. That is the source of those who instigated the dark turmoil. The battle raged on for an unknown duration, but Chu Wuang watched it with utter fascination. Moreover, he himself was unaware that as he kept watching this great battle, the power within his body was constantly increasing. Ultimately, without anyone noticing, his cultivation level directly rose to the great sage perfection realm. It should be noted that it is extremely difficult for other geniuses to advance even a small realm. However, Chu Wuang broke through to a minor realm so easily, and now that he has broken through to the Great Sage Perfection realm, he can fight against ordinary mid-stage, quasi-emperor level experts. This great battle raged in an unknown time and space for an unknown duration, but Chu Wuang could see that it ultimately ended with the fall of the 4 divine beasts. Moreover, the divine beast White Tiger was corrupted by the darkness within the dark forbidden zone, ultimately forced to self-destruct its body. At the same time, a black light emanated from its body as it self-destructed. The black light pierced directly into the earth. This must be why the divine beast White Tiger transformed into a black tiger. Upon seeing this black light, Chu Wuang instantly understood why the divine beast he had tamed, the White Tiger, had initially been a black tiger. Then he slowly looked up at the top of his head. Although the 4 divine beasts have perished, the 3 supreme beings in the forbidden zones before us have not. However, it is clear that their injuries are quite severe. 2 supreme beings within the dark forbidden zone are now only 1 step away from their demise. Then, the 3 supreme beings took a deep look at the place where the 4 divine beasts had fallen, and then flew directly into the sky without any hesitation. A scene resembling the end of the world descended instantly. These 3 beings from the dark forbidden zone began absorbing the life force of this world. And in the blink of an eye, tens of millions of lives perished at the hands of the supreme beings of the dark forbidden zone. Seeing this, Chu Wuang was furious. If he could, he would probably have already attacked the supreme beings of these forbidden zones. Chapter 802 The Palace Deep in the Wasteland, the Aura of the Laws of Time. Unfortunately, Chu Wuang can't do anything right now. It could be said that he could only helplessly watch the actions of the 3 supreme beings in the dark forbidden zone. As time passed, this so-called world turned into a wasteland. Now Chu Wuang finally understands why she came to this wasteland. It turns out that the wasteland he is in now was brought by these 3 supreme beings from the dark forbidden zone. Thinking about this, Chu Wuang became even more furious with the dark forbidden zone. If we have the strength in the future, we will definitely destroy this dark forbidden zone. At the same time, he secretly vowed in his heart that as long as he was strong enough, he would definitely destroy the dark forbidden zone in the future. Only the true destruction of the dark forbidden zone can resolve this issue. Otherwise, even if the supreme beings within the dark forbidden zone are subdued, they will still launch a dark turmoil in another era. Because the truly top-tier experts in this world don't live particularly long lives. Moreover, most of these supreme beings in the dark forbidden zone were active in an era without great emperors. If there were great emperors in this era, they would never have chosen to emerge. This is why the dark forbidden zones rarely appear during the era of great emperors attaining enlightenment. After all, they cannot choose to appear in an era with great emperors. In this way, they avoided a battle with the current emperor, meaning they wouldn't have to fight a major war with him. The true emperor-level powerhouses are unable to find the source of the dark forbidden zone, and more importantly, the strongest beings in the dark forbidden zone are not these dark sovereigns, but those remnant immortal-level powerhouses who have existed for millions of years. Therefore, even if these emperors found the source of the dark forbidden zone, they could not solve the dark forbidden zone, which is why these emperors were so helpless. However, if one can break through to a higher level, then one can naturally find the source of the dark forbidden zone and directly resolve the dark forbidden zone. However, solving the dark forbidden zone is not so simple. Even Chu Fan of the Great Xia Empire does not think he can solve the dark forbidden zone right now. Otherwise, he could have led the top experts of the Great Xia Empire to slaughter the powerful figures in the dark forbidden zone. Of course, he also has other ideas in mind now, namely, to deal with the dark forbidden zone after the path to immortality is completed. At this moment, Chu Wuang, who was above the wasteland, glanced at it before leisurely looking into the distance. Because he himself knew that he was not good enough. Keep in mind that he is currently under the protection of the Great Xia Empire. Even so, the Great Xia Empire could not solve the dark forbidden zone. Not to mention him, a mere great sage. Fortunately, he has now broken through to the Great Sage Perfection realm. He was only 1 step away from truly reaching the quasi-emperor realm. Therefore, it is naturally very easy for him to break through to a higher level. However, Chu Wuang looked at the now vanished scene with some confusion, because he didn't expect that even after the image disappeared, he would still be standing in this world. It was as if this unknown space and time was waiting for him. Thinking of this, Chu Wuang did not hesitate at all and headed straight for the space-time ahead. Most importantly, even if he were to stand in this space-time now, he wouldn't be of much use. So he wanted to see what force had brought him to this unknown space-time. Or rather, this is not an unknown time and space, but a past era. He slowly stepped forward. Soon, Another strange light appeared before him. Then Chu Wuang appeared in another space-time. Upon arriving in this space-time, he saw a magnificent palace before him. However, one can sense that there is no sign of life in this palace. Instead, it looked extremely lifeless. It's as if a once magnificent palace is now completely deserted. Although Chu Wuang was puzzled by this, he now had a guess in his mind. Perhaps when he first entered this wasteland, he had already arrived at the direction of the great emperor's legacy. Perhaps the true lineage of the great emperor lies within this palace. Without the slightest hesitation, he stepped directly into the palace gate. Then he slapped the door with his palm. A terrifying force pushed open the palace gates. The moment Chu Wuang pushed open the palace door, she felt a surge of time power. This is not the power of time itself, but the power of the laws of time. Upon witnessing this scene, Chu Wuang instantly understood that this powerful emperor must be an emperor who cultivated the laws of time. However, his gaze was now fixed directly on the palace. At this moment, he could also clearly see the scene inside the palace. There are 4 huge pillars in this palace. These pillars are carved with the 4 mythical beasts. Each mythical beast seemed to be a real creature. At the same time, the aura emanating from these 4 divine beasts is also extremely terrifying. It was as if they could intimidate stronger individuals who were weaker than them. At the very front was a jade throne that looked absolutely perfect. At this moment, a blurry figure was still sitting on it. Upon seeing this, Chu Wuang stepped forward without hesitation. Now that he's already here, there's no reason for him to back down. Moreover, he carries the mark of the Great Xia Empire and its trump card. Therefore, he is naturally not afraid of what might be waiting for him here. As he slowly stepped into the main hall, the entire hall was completely silent. Only the sound of his footsteps echoed from within. At the same time, he quickly arrived in front of the blurry figure. The aura emanating from the stone statues of the 4 divine beasts began to slowly emanate from him. It was as if these auras were about to force him to prostrate himself on the ground. However, Chu Wuang's face did not show much expression at this moment. Instead, he calmly looked at the blurry figure in front of him. "You've arrived." Just as he approached the blurry figure, a voice, seemingly non-existent in the world, slowly emanated. At the same time, he could see that the blurry figure in front of him seemed to be struggling. One after another, the laws of time emanated from his body. However, after struggling for a moment, all that could be seen was a fleeting glimpse of the river of time. Then the blurry figure appeared, as if it had stepped out from the river of time. He was dressed in a long white robe, exuding a strong aura of time. Even so, Chu Wuang still couldn't see his face clearly. Chapter 803 The Terrifying Laws of Time. The Master of the Great Emperor's Secret Realm. Even so, Chu Wuang could still sense that the figure in front of him was constantly watching him. Junior Chu Wuang greets Senior. At this moment, Chu Wuang could only cup his hands in a salute to the figure in front of him, while his eyes held a hint of curiosity. He could sense that the power of the surrounding laws of time far exceeded that of ordinary great emperor-level experts, and the power of the laws they could wield was beyond what was possible. Clearly, the time law cultivated by this emperor far surpasses that of ordinary laws. Millions of years have passed, and I never expected that I would finally meet a true genius. Then, this figure slowly emitted a voice that seemed to come from the river of time. At the same time, his figure slowly came to Chu Wuang's side. He could feel time relentlessly pushing his body away. It was as if he didn't want his body to appear in this space and time. However, how could this figure possibly defy time? He retreated slowly, somewhat helplessly. Even so, the terrifying time law emanating from him kept him trapped in this space-time once again. At the same time, he looked at Chu Wuang in front of him with a complicated expression. He could sense just how extraordinary Chu Wuang was in front of him, but unfortunately, he couldn't get close to her right now. Meanwhile, Chu Wuang was constantly using his golden eyes to examine the surrounding laws of time. He also wanted to know why the surrounding laws of time were trapping the emperor outside. At the same time, he was even more curious about whether the emperor in front of him had actually perished. Unfortunately, although his golden eyes carried the fortune of the Great Xia Empire, it was still extremely difficult for him to truly see through the laws of time. Unless the emperor before him is someone who has just entered the emperor level, then perhaps he could see through the laws of time here. Unfortunately, the laws of time here and the laws of time wielded by this emperor far exceeded his capacity to withstand them. Your luck is very strong. Even a typical great emperor-level expert doesn't have as much luck as you. However, you still can't see through the time law I'm cultivating. Moreover, the power of the time law in this void far exceeds that of a 3-life great emperor. Unless you can break through to the great emperor realm and then use your luck, you won't be able to see through everything here. The figure in front of him sighed, and, at the same time, he naturally saw through Chu Wuang's thoughts. Then he waved to Chu Wuang, his eyes filled with a touch of emotion. At the same time, he was also very shocked that the fortune of Chu Wuang in front of him was so terrifying. More importantly, he could feel that the fortune of Chu Wuang was not Chu Wuang's own fortune, but the fortune of a country. Thinking about this, he roughly guessed the identity of the boy in front of him. If this young man possesses such terrifying fortune, then he must be the crown prince of an empire, and the power of this empire far surpasses any empire he has ever seen before. Because only the aura of the emperor's ruler can be so intense as to reach the level of a great emperor. However, the fortune of the young man in front of him far exceeded that of an ordinary emperor. From this, it can be seen that the true emperor of this empire is definitely stronger than an emperor. Is the senior the master of this secret realm? After hearing the words of the white figure in front of him, Chu Wuang also put away his golden eyes and then looked at the white figure in front of him with some curiosity and spoke. After he finished speaking, he still had a hint of curiosity in his eyes, clearly wanted to see if he had actually met the great emperor of this secret realm. Indeed, this secret realm was formed after my fall. I just didn't expect that millions of years had passed since my fall. At this moment, after hearing Chu Wuang's words, the figure also spoke up directly. At the same time, a hint of sadness could be heard in his voice. Clearly, he hadn't expected that he would be gone for millions of years. Was it those supreme beings in the Forbidden Zone who truly caused the great emperor's downfall? Upon hearing the words of the white-clad figure before him, Chu Wuang immediately inquired, also wanting to see if it was indeed the supreme being within the Forbidden Zone who had killed the great emperor before him. Their strength was not enough to kill me. What truly led to my demise was the attack of the top experts in the Forbidden Zone, including a remnant immortal. The white-clad figure sneered upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, but his subsequent statement carried a hint of seriousness, because those true supreme beings posed no threat to him, while the ones who truly attacked him were the remnant immortals within the Forbidden Zone. Although his strength was already quite good at that time, he was still far inferior to a true immortal, which is why he ultimately perished at the hands of an immortal. It was those guys who made the move. The main reason Father has been cultivating all these years is to prevent those guys from doing so. It seems that the Forbidden Zone is indeed not as simple as I thought. After hearing the words of the white figure, Chu Wuang murmured to himself as he looked into the distance. In fact, he had been wondering since he was very young that his father's strength was so terrifying. So why didn't his own father destroy the Forbidden Zone? Later, he found some answers from Zhao Gao Luo and others, because they told him that there were beings at the level of remnant immortals in the Forbidden Zone. This is also why Chu Fan didn't shoot in the restricted area. Now that he heard there was a remnant immortal in the forbidden area, he finally realized what was going on. It seems that the area you live in has already produced an emperor-level being, and this emperor should be your father. However, it's best for him not to make a move against the Forbidden Zone right now, because the Forbidden Zone is not as simple as it seems. If he were just a supreme being, how could he possibly threaten our universe? Upon hearing Chu Wuang's words, the white-clad figure instantly understood the strength of the father Chu Wuang spoke of, and thus addressed Chu Wuang in a very solemn tone. Of course, he also wanted to advise Chu Wuang's father not to make a move, because those who could achieve the level of an emperor were not weak. As long as he forges his own path, he may one day truly be able to challenge the restricted area. Chapter 804 Chu Wuang's conversation with the emperor. Chu Wuang obtains the inheritance. Only after truly experiencing the immense power of the remnant immortals within the Forbidden Zone did he understand just how terrifying it was. He had never taken the Forbidden Zone seriously before, but when he truly realized just how powerful the remnant immortal-level experts within it were, he too fell into despair. That's why he's now advising the young man in front of him not to attack the restricted area. I wonder if you know about the Heavenly God Academy. After hearing the words of the emperor in front of him, Chu Wuang understood his meaning. However, at this moment, he was more interested in learning about the Heavenly God Academy, because the true enemy of the Great Xia Empire was the Heavenly God Academy. Therefore, he wanted to see just how powerful the Heavenly God Academy was, hoping it might be able to help his empire. Has the Heavenly God Academy, this mysterious force, reappeared in this era? After hearing Chu Wuang's words, the white-clad figure sighed softly, a hint of emotion in his eyes. Clearly, he had some understanding of the Heavenly God Academy. Then, the aura of the laws of time around him began to tremble, as if it had mentioned something forbidden. That's right. The current situation between the Heavenly God Academy and my father is one of irreconcilable enmity, so I would like to learn some things about the Heavenly God Academy from you. Upon hearing the words of the white-clad figure before him, Chu Wuang immediately addressed him, for he had learned from Xian Yuanpa that the great emperor of this great emperor's secret realm had a close relationship with their Xian Yuan clan. Therefore, he naturally knew that there must be a grudge between the owner of this secret realm and the Heavenly God Academy, although this was just his guess. After all, if the owner of this secret realm is on good terms with the Xian Yuan family, then perhaps he can find out some secrets about the Heavenly God Academy here. Logically speaking, the Heavenly God Academy shouldn't have any grudges with your father, unless your father breaks through to the human emperor realm. After hearing Chu Wuang's words, the white-clad figure began to mutter to himself. However, he quickly looked at Chu Wuang in front of him with a look of shock and spoke. He naturally knew something about the feud between the Heavenly God Academy and the Xian Yuan family, so he had already guessed some of the reasons why the Heavenly God Academy had taken action. That's right. My father was the human emperor of this era. When he broke through to the human emperor realm, he fought a great battle with the top experts of the Heavenly God Academy. Moreover, a top emperor from the Xian Yuan family also came to help my father. After hearing the words of the white-clad figure, Chu Wuang slowly spoke, his eyes filled with anger as he spoke. Because he was just a child when Chu Fan broke through, he didn't know what had happened at that time. Although he later learned within the Great Xia Empire how many powerful figures from the Heavenly God Academy intervened when his father broke through, at that time he still believed that the Great Xia Empire acted out of fear of his father. However, after hearing the words of the white figure, he felt that things were not as simple as he had imagined. If the Heavenly God Academy has to intervene, if someone breaks through to the human emperor realm, then the Heavenly God Academy should not allow a human emperor realm expert to appear. Alas, I never expected that a being at the human emperor realm could appear in this era. It seems that your father was also an unparalleled genius. However, since your father has been targeted by the Heavenly God Academy, then I would like to warn your father to be careful of the Heavenly God Academy. The Heavenly God Academy may not be weaker than the Forbidden Zone. The white-clad figure sighed helplessly and then casually reminded Chu Wuang in front of him. Of course, he doesn't believe that the Great Xia Empire is strong enough to fight against the Heavenly God Academy. Senior, what I want to know is how many remnant immortals there are in the Heavenly God Academy. Because 100 years from now, there will definitely be a battle between my Great Xia Empire and the Heavenly God Academy. So knowing the number of strong people among them will be of great benefit to me. Chu Wuang bowed to the white figure in front of him and said, because he also wanted to know what level he needed to reach to fight against the Heavenly God Academy. As the eldest prince of the Great Xia Empire, Chu Wuang naturally knew that there were several true immortal-level powerhouses in the Great Xia Empire. Therefore, he wanted to see if these new-level powerhouses of the Great Xia Empire could withstand the remnant immortals from the Heavenly God Academy. Although I cultivated the Great Tao of Time and became the Time Emperor, I don't know much about the remnant immortals in the Heavenly God Academy. I haven't reached the point where I understand the remnant immortals in the Heavenly God Academy. However, there are at least 4 remnant immortals in the Heavenly God Academy. The white-clad figure chuckled self-deprecatingly after hearing Chu Wuang's words. Although his strength was considerable, he was still unable to come into contact with a true remnant immortal. Moreover, he was once completely destroyed by a mere remnant immortal in the Forbidden Zone, which shows that there is still a certain gap between him and a remnant immortal. Is that so? After hearing the words of the white-clad figure in front of him, Chu Wuang sighed softly and said, however, you could see a hint of disappointment on his face. Although I don't know how powerful your Great Xia Empire is, the fact that the Heavenly God Academy doesn't attack your Great Xia Empire means that your Great Xia Empire's strength is not so simple. Now that you have come to my inheritance site, I will pass on the inheritance to you. I hope that you and the Great Xia Empire can protect the lives of people in this world. The white figure was being continuously devoured by the terrifying power of time emanating from him, so he helplessly spoke to Chu Wuang. At the same time, a terrifying power of the laws of time began to envelop the entire palace. The next second, a terrifying force directly entered Chu Wuang's mind. The white figure glanced at Chu Wuang, sighed silently, and then disappeared from the world. Meanwhile, Chu Wuang was constantly absorbing the terrifying information in his mind. They didn't even find the white figure that had already disappeared. At the same time, many time laws appeared around him. These laws of time enveloped his entire being. Although he had never cultivated the laws of time before, he began to slowly emanate the aura of the laws of time from his body. Clearly, the inheritance that the emperor just gave him was not as simple as he had imagined. As for why this emperor chose Chu Wuang without the slightest hesitation, it was mainly because he valued Chu Wuang's potential and the power behind him.